Chapter 83. Establishing authority, heavily punishing the young master. 1. Han Yuqi looked at official Ouyang in disbelief, then looked at his mother, Madame Shu. He was puzzled. Were these two possessed? Why were they so polite to Han Yuqi? Mother, he was about to speak when Madame Shu leaned forward and scolded, "Ungrateful thing, your dog eyes can't see Mount Tai. Why aren't you apologizing to the princess consort? Although the princess consort is your sister, you can't make this kind of joke." She angrily reprimanded while constantly giving Han Yuqi looks. However, Han Yuqi was very stupid and didn't understand at all. He looked suspiciously at his mother and stood motionless. Madame Shu was angry and anxious. She suddenly stood up and grabbed her son's ear, angrily scolding, "Unfilial son, kneel down. Of all kinds of jokes, you made this kind of joke with your sister. Do you know that threatening the princess consort is a capital offense? If you want to court death, no one can stop you. Ah, it hurts, let go, let go." Han Yuqi was in so much pain that he had no choice but to bend down. At this time, Madame Shu took the opportunity to whisper in his ear, "Stinky brat, you think I'm willing to follow her? The rumors are true. Han Yuqi really saved the crown prince, your grandfather said it himself." What? The rumors were true. Han Yuqi really saved the crown prince, so she was now a great hero. Han Yuqi only felt that his head had been hit by something, shaking him so much that he couldn't recover for a moment. His legs went soft and he directly knelt down. "Princess consort, this stinky brat has been shooting his mouth off since he was young. You also know that, after all, he's still young. Please forgive him this time. It's all my fault, I didn't teach my son well. I'll apologize to you." Madame Shu was very sincere, but her eyes hid her dissatisfaction. It had to be known that she had always been arrogant and bossy towards Han Yuqi, ordering her around. At this time, official Ouyang on the side quickly pleaded for leniency. "Princess consort, eldest young master, this. Eldest young master is indeed outrageous, but this is still a matter of the Han family. If this matter is brought to the Supreme Court, you will lose face and become a joke to the outer sect." Han Yuqi sneered in her heart. Of course, she knew about the relationship between official Ouyang and the Minister of Personnel Affairs. Official Ouyang's words were really decent. She ignored Lady Shu and official Ouyang, looking down at Han Yuqi from high above. She asked half-jokingly, "Eldest young master, who is this lowly girl scolding?" Madame Shu and General Ouyang were frightened by these words. Han Yuqi was even more frightened. He felt his legs go soft and couldn't kneel. "This commoner will apologize to you. This commoner was wrong. Han Yuqi was so frightened that his words were incoherent. If Han Yuqi became the hero who saved the crown prince, then she would no longer be a princess consort in name. At least, the imperial family recognized her. Like this, with the status of a commoner in the Han family, if they disrespected her, it would be a serious crime. Thinking of his previous actions, Han Yuqi's intestines turned green with regret. He suddenly gave himself a slap. "Esteemed princess consort, this commoner's mouth is cheap. This commoner will punish himself." Seeing this, Madame Shu was shocked and covered her mouth in disbelief. Her precious son. Unfortunately, Han Yuqi coldly looked at him. She didn't move and didn't react. Han Yuqi could only force himself to slap himself again. Of course, his movements weren't big. He was afraid of pain. However, after the second slap, Han Yuqi was still indifferent, looking at him with an expressionless face. What to do? Should he continue to slap himself? No, he was afraid of pain. Han Yuqi was helpless and could only look at his mother for help. Madame Shu saw those two slaps and her heart ached. She wanted to explode, but she didn't dare. She hurriedly bowed and persuaded, "Esteemed princess consort, he's still your blood-related younger brother. He didn't do it on purpose and didn't really disrespect you. Teach him a lesson and he won't dare to do it again." At this time, Han Yuqi finally opened her mouth. "Afraid of pain?" "Yes, his face is swollen. This lesson is enough for him to remember for a lifetime." Madame Shu hurriedly said. "Is that so?" Han Yuqi leaned over and calmly lifted Han Yuqi's chin. Han Yuqi was incomparably nervous and didn't dare to move. Han Yunshi seriously lifted his face and looked left and right. It was all white and clean, even more delicate than a woman's. There wasn't a single scar. If this was considered painful, then what were the wounds on her arms from the whip when she was young? Then what about the bloody scars on Han Yunyi's back? Han Yunshi's eyes flashed with anger as she said coldly, "Whether or not his face is swollen isn't up to you to say." So speaking, she viciously shook off Han Yuchi's chin and said coldly, "Little Chen Xiong, beat him for this Wang Fei." "No!" Madame Shu exclaimed. Her tone suddenly turned fierce. "Yunshi, he's your blood-related younger brother. You two were born of the same father. You can't be so heartless." Han Yunshi laughed coldly. "The one lying in the room is also his blood-related younger brother, born of the same father. How can he be so heartless?" Of course Madame Shu knew what her own son had done. For a moment, she was at a loss for words. "Yunshi, this stinking brat doesn't know any better. Could it be that you're also following?" Before she could finish, Han Yunshi laughed coldly. "What, is second madam blaming Yunshi for not knowing any better?" "Second madam?" Madame Shu gave a start. For a moment, she didn't realize that Han Yunshi was referring to her. Yes, she wasn't the official wife, but Han Konggan had married her in accordance with the rights of an official wife. Since the first day she entered the house, everyone had called her Madame Shu. Today was the first time she'd heard the words second madam. These words represented a concubine. Han Yunshi was humiliating her. Madame Shu's hands clenched into claws inside her sleeves. What a Han Yunshi! She'd already coaxed her with kind words, but what else did she want? If Han Yunshi didn't have Yuchi's weakness in her hands, she wouldn't have spoken so humbly. Madame Shu took a deep breath, doing her best to ignore Han Yunshi's words. She did her best to calm herself down. A wise man didn't fight when the odds were against him, so she endured. No, how could I mean that? Yunshi, you're the eldest sister. You've been more sensible since you were young. Han Yunshi smiled coldly. Second madam's meaning is that you're still blaming me for not being sensible? Madame Shu was once again at a loss for words. She didn't know what to say, but nudged official Ouyang beside her with her elbow. Esteemed Wang Fei, official Ouyang was about to coax her when Han Yunshi raised a hand to stop him. Official Ouyang, just then you said that offending one's superiors would result in 50 beatings. You weren't lying to this Wang Fei, were you? Official Ouyang gave a start. Seeing Han Yunshi so serious, he was afraid to take the blame and quickly shook his head. I don't dare. It really is 50 beatings. Just then, Han Yuchi cursed this Wang Fei as a lowly girl. That counts as offending one's superiors, right? Han Yunshi asked again. Official Ouyang could only nod. It counts. Since it counts, then shouldn't he be flogged 100 times for offending one's superiors twice? Han Yunshi suddenly said sternly. As soon as these words came out, Han Yuchi's entire body was paralyzed. His body was weak and his mind was blank. Madame Shu was so scared that her face turned white. She coldly looked at official Ouyang, her eyes full of warning. But so what if she gave a warning? Official Ouyang didn't dare to offend Han Yunshi. He could only avoid her gaze. Official Ouyang, take him out for me. Carry out the punishment. Han Yunshi didn't give them a chance to catch their breath. 100 beatings with a cane could kill someone. Compared to beatings with a cane, what was a slap? They only had two paths. Either they were beaten or they were flogged 100 times. Beat. Madame Shu didn't have a choice. She suddenly stood up and anxiously said, Esteemed Wang Fei, this stinky brat deserves to be beaten. Deserves to be beaten. Taking advantage of the fact that Han Yunshi hadn't insisted on flogging, she quickly stepped forward and grabbed little Chen Xiong's hand. Miss, you beat. Little Chen Xiong loathed this pair of mother and son. She fiercely shook off her hand and calmly said, Miss, my hand is small, while eldest young master's skin is thick. Perhaps my hand will swell before eldest young master's face does. Han Yunshi secretly laughed. So this little Chen Xiong had a poisonous tongue as well. Hearing that little Chen Xiong wasn't going to beat him, Han Yuchi seemed to be scared witless. He sat paralyzed on the ground without moving. The darkness in Madame Shu's eyes couldn't be dispelled. A trace of calculation flashed past her eyes before they turned red and she started crying. Yunshi, just let your little brother go. I'm begging you, beg. Pretending to be pitiful. A cold smile rose to Han Yunshi's lips as she looked towards 7th Madam, Helian Zuexiang, who was still unconscious on the side. If begging worked, then this pitiful mother wouldn't be threatened with a body search. If begging was useful, she wouldn't have suffered so much growing up. Han Yunshi fiercely shook off Madame Shu's hand, showing no mercy. Official Ouyang, take him away for me. No, don't. Madame Shu shouted, blocking Official Ouyang. I'll hit him. I'll hit him myself. Yunshi, I'll teach him a lesson myself. As she spoke, she was afraid that Han Yunshi wouldn't give her another chance. Without hesitation, she ruthlessly slapped Han Yunshi across the face. Pa! What a resounding slap! This time, Han Yunshi woke up. He subconsciously covered his face and was about to dodge when Madame Shu said coldly, "Someone come, detain him for me." The surrounding servants were all stunned. Hearing Madame Shu's shout, 2 of them stepped forward to detain Han Yunshi. Mother, as soon as Han Yunshi spoke, Madame Shu slapped him again. Pa! This clear and bright sound made the surrounding manservants tremble in fear. Official Ouyang didn't dare to look and turned his head away. These 2 slaps left red palm marks on Han Yuchi's cheeks, making them slightly swollen. Madame Shu's hand hurt, but her heart hurt even more. She treasured this son so much. Forget about herself, she wouldn't even allow Han Konggan to hit her son. But today, she was going to do it herself. Madame Shu's hand trembled as her heart shattered. Han Yunshi only felt his cheeks burning. It hurt so much that he didn't even dare to touch them. This should be enough, right? Esteemed Wang Fei, it's swollen, completely swollen, Madame Shu said in a choked voice. She wanted nothing more than to rush over and slap Han Yunshi. It really was a bit swollen, but compared to the injuries on Yi Er's back, it paled in comparison. 2 slaps were worth 100 beatings. Wasn't Madame Shu too good at calculating accounts? Han Yunshi glanced at her and said coldly, "This Wang Fei said just then, whether it's swollen or not isn't up to you to decide." What? Han Yunshi was about to cry at these words. Madame Shu had long cried, but she didn't dare to argue. She could only grit her teeth and continue. 1 slap from the left, 1 from the right, 1 after another. Pa! 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 The sounds rose and fell one after another, fierce and intense. Madame Shu's hand hurt, and Han Yuchi's face hurt. The mother and son cried together, but Han Yunshi still didn't call for them to stop. In the end, all the surrounding servants didn't dare to watch, their hearts filled with fear. This eldest young miss, no, to be exact, Qin Wangfei was really not to be trifled with. They had all misjudged her. Chapter 84. Helian Zuexiang, who had fainted on the side, had also woken up at some point. She was dumbstruck as she watched Lady Shu hit her son. Only when she saw official Ouyang did she understand. Finally, Lady Shu's hand lost strength and Han Yuchi's face was swollen like a pig's. Lady Shu fell to her knees. "Esteemed Wang Fei, look, it's swollen. It's really swollen." "Raise your head and look," Han Yunshi said coldly. No matter how much pain Han Yuchi was in, it still hurt. He quickly raised his head and saw the big red pig's head. Han Yunshi almost laughed out loud, but of course, she held it in. "Yuan, it can be considered swollen," she said mildly. Hearing this, Lady Shu and Han Yuchi both fell back into their seats, finally letting out a sigh of relief. But who knew that Han Yunshi would continue? The crime of offending one's superior can be forgiven, but the crime of threatening this Wang Fei. She didn't finish her sentence and looked at official Ouyang. What? He was already beaten to this state and she still wanted to continue questioning him? And she was asking about the crime of threatening. Official Ouyang didn't expect this and his heart skipped a beat. He didn't think this woman would be so difficult to deal with. Lady Shu and Han Yuchi were both stunned and didn't recover. How could this be? What did Han Yunshi want to do? For a moment, the entire courtyard was silent. All the servants were so scared that they held their breaths, not daring to make a sound. Everyone had just heard official Ouyang say that threatening Qin Wangfei was a capital offense. Official Ouyang, eldest young master, Han brought so many pageboys to threaten this Wangfei and even tried to steal my things. He's already posed a threat to the safety of this Wangfei's ginseng. According to the law, how should this be judged? Han Yunqi asked seriously. When these words came out, the surrounding servants all fell to their knees. It's over, it's over. They were also going to suffer a calamity, and at this time, the courtyard was already surrounded by people who had heard the news and rushed over. Almost all the servants had come, and third Madame Li and her daughter Han Ruoxue were hiding among them. Madame Li was around 30 years old. She maintained herself very well and did not lose out to a young woman's beauty. She even had more charm than a young woman. Her daughter, Han Ruoxue, looked very similar to her. Her pair of big, watery eyes were especially moving. They didn't say much and just watched silently. Compared to Madame Xu and her son, Madame Li and her daughter were much calmer. In the silent courtyard, official Ouyang was in a difficult position. Esteemed Wangfei, this, before he could finish, Lady Xu suddenly cried out and burst into tears. Yunqi, do you really have to be so heartless? Yunqi. Yuqi is the Han family's eldest son, he's their heir and hope. Your father is already like that. Don't tell me you still want to destroy the last hope of the Han family. I beg you, spare him this time. Madame Xu could only pretend to be pitiful. She kept wiping her tears, no longer caring about her image. Han Yuqi started crying as well, imploring, Big sis, I'll do anything you want. Just spare me this time. I won't dare next time. It had to be said that this scene caused Madame Xu and her sons standing in the hearts of the Han family to plummet. Han Yunqi had undoubtedly established her prestige. Even Madame Xu and her son were begging her like this. In the future, who in the Han family would dare to look down on her and not fear her? Han Yunqi smiled coldly in her heart. She was just waiting for Han Yuqi to say those words. She was only trying to scare mother and son. So why would she really bring the matter to the justice courts and sentence Han Yuqi to death for his crimes? If she really did, wouldn't she become a heartless and ruthless woman in everyone's eyes who didn't care about brotherly affection? Moreover, Han Kong'an was already crippled. The Han family needed someone to support it. She was just a married daughter. No matter how much power she had, she was still an outsider. Madame Xu's backing was the strongest. With her here, at least the relatives wouldn't covet the Han family's property. Seventh Madame's branch was still too weak. For the time being, they weren't able to support the Han family with its internal and external troubles. Han Yunqi scrutinized Han Yuqi. After a long time, she said coldly, Fine. For father's sake, the death penalty can be avoided, but the punishment can't be avoided. Hearing this, Madame Xu and her son felt as if they had been pardoned. Madame Xu's heart, which had been hanging high in the air, finally calmed down. As for Han Yuqi, this outwardly strong but inwardly weak thing, he almost fainted from fright. Fortunately, his mother caught him in time and stealthily pinched his waist, waking him up. It was already embarrassing enough. If he fainted from fright at this time, how could he raise his head in the Han family in the future? Many thanks for esteemed Wangfei's mercy. Many thanks for esteemed Wangfei's mercy. Madame Xu expressed her thanks again and again, but when she lowered her head, a trace of hatred flashed past her eyes. She was such a pampered, proud, and arrogant person. She was the mistress of this household, but for the sake of her son's life, she had no choice but to lower her voice and beg Han Yunqi in public. How could she not hate her? This wild girl with no mother to raise her, did she really think she was a phoenix just because she'd flown up to a branch? Don't think that the Empress Dowager and Empress would let her go just because she saved the Crown Prince's life. Don't think that Grand Concubine Yi would acknowledge her just because she entered the Duke of Qin's gates. Don't think that just because she was Qin Wangfei, she had the right to come back and manage the Han family's affairs. This time, she and Yuqi had endured and suffered a loss. As long as she didn't have any evidence to use against them, what could she do to them? If they couldn't escape punishment, then so be it. As long as they didn't die, they would only suffer some physical pain. What could Han Yunqi do to Yuqi? The Han family's affairs were still up to her, the wife, and the eldest son, Yuchi, to decide. If Han Yunshi wanted to take a single cent from the Han family, she could forget about it. If she wanted to protect 7th Madam's branch, there was no way. Unable to answer, official Ouyang finally had a way out. He quickly flattered, esteemed Wang Fei's magnanimity is the Han family's fortune. Han Yunshi smiled. Then what does official Ouyang think the punishment should be? This, Lady Shu and Han Yuchi both looked over. Official Ouyang was a man who wouldn't die if he didn't seek death. He dearly wanted to say that since his face was swollen from the slaps, he should be lenient with his punishment. But seeing Han Yunshi's fake smile, he didn't dare to say anything. He could only laugh awkwardly. Of course I'll listen to esteemed Wang Fei. At these words, Lady Shu and her son's gazes were filled with resentment. Little Chen Xiong, what do you think? Han Yunshi asked lazily. Mistress, the death penalty can be avoided, but the punishment should be 100 beatings. Little Chen Xiong answered casually, as if she was talking about the weather. At these words, Han Yuchi's eyes widened. Lady Shu held back her anger. Cold, she said, this little girl really knows how to joke. How is it a joke? I think it's a good idea. Han Yunshi said casually, as if she was also talking about the weather. At this moment, everyone's faces were completely pale. Even Lady Shu's face was completely dark. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Official Ouyang couldn't hold it in anymore. He hurriedly advised, esteemed Wang Fei, 100 beatings will kill someone. They've already been beaten. In this official's opinion, this punishment should be lighter. Of course, Han Yunshi knew that 100 beatings would kill someone. She was just scaring Lady Shu. After all, it wasn't easy to see the face of the eldest daughter of the Minister of Personnel's family turn pale. She grew up being bullied and oppressed. Scolded every 3 days, beaten every 5 days, and whipped several times with bamboo whips until her arms were covered in skin. All of this was mostly due to Lady Shu. How could she not know Lady Shu's temper? This woman, no matter if she was gently persuading or crying and begging, her heart was vicious. It was like a viper was hiding, waiting for an opportunity to bite back. And the only one who could restrain her was undoubtedly her precious son. Han Yunshi glanced at Lady Shu with a pensive expression. Lenient punishment, eh? Well. Seeing this, everyone became nervous. Lady Shu hurriedly gave official Ouyang a look. Official Ouyang hesitated for a moment, then cautiously advised, esteemed Wang Fei, why don't we follow the Han family's rules? The Han family's rules were quite strict, but no matter which one it was lighter than 100 beatings. Han Yunshi had been served by the family's rules since she was young. There were more than 100 rules, and she knew them all. It seemed like official Ouyang and Lady Shu still had hope. Soon, she made them despair. Coldly, she said, this Wang Fei is now punishing him for the crime of threatening. Official Ouyang, are you mistaken? Official Ouyang's heart jumped, then he suddenly understood. It seemed that Han Yuchi couldn't escape this calamity. Lady Shu didn't give up and still wanted to persuade, but Han Yunshi said coldly, 50 beatings. Whoever else pleads for mercy for him, beat them together. When these words came out, the crowd was silent. Lady Shu looked at Han Yunshi in disbelief. She didn't think that this lowly girl would dare to be serious. 50 beatings. Even if he wasn't crippled, he wouldn't be able to get out of bed for a month or 2. At this critical juncture of fighting for the family head position, as the eldest young master, Han Yuchi couldn't even get out of bed. How could he compete with 3rd Enyang and 7th Enyang? Wasn't this deliberately making the eldest young master fall out early? Lady Shu tightly clenched her fists. She was about to explode, but who knew that Han Yuchi couldn't hold back first? He suddenly rushed in front of Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi, don't be so shameless. This young master has had enough. This young master is telling you, today, if you dare to. Before he could finish, official Ouyang quickly went forward to pull him back. Eldest young master, don't be rude. Han Yuchi suddenly broke free and wanted to continue scolding. Official Ouyang quickly went over and reminded in a low voice, Lady Shu, you can't. If this continues, things will get out of hand. You have to know, eldest young master offended the Wangfei first. Regardless of the Wangfei's position in the Wangfu, Ari, she is still the face of the Duke of Qin's household. If things get out of hand, even Minister Shengshu might not. Official Ouyang didn't continue, but Lady Shu understood this. She was very unwilling, but she had no choice but to pull her son back. Yuqi, have you been beaten senseless? Why don't you? Han Yuqi was used to bullying others. Today, he was bullied so miserably. How could he calm down? He angrily said to Lady Shu, Mother, what are you afraid of her for? Didn't you say that even if she's the Wangfei, she can't do whatever she wants to us? We still have grandfather's support. Grandfather isn't someone to be trifled with. Of course, Lady Shu had said this before. She had even said something even more outrageous. However, she couldn't say it in front of Han Yunqi. She had no choice but to pinch Han Yuqi's arm to make him shut up. Enough. If you continue to speak nonsense and go crazy, you can get out of the Han family. Lady Shu could only warn him like this. Han Yuqi was still most afraid of this mother. Hearing this, he could only bitterly remain silent. Chapter 85. Han Yunqi listened to Han Yuqi's words from the side, but wasn't surprised. Lady Shu had said the same thing to the bridal sedan chair on the day of her wedding. Moreover, her words were even uglier and more arrogant. She'd said that she, Han Yunqi, wouldn't be a phoenix even if she flew to a branch. A lowly girl would always be a lowly girl. She'd said that she, Han Yunqi, was marrying the Duke of Qin like a toad wanting to eat emu meat. If it was anyone else, they'd have slammed their heads against the wall and died long ago. Only her skin was 3 feet thick enough to get on the bridal sedan chair. Although it was Grand Concubine Yi who told the wedding nanny to go the wrong way that day, Lady Shu had her own ways as well. Whether it was her wedding dress, makeup, or jewelry, everything had been tampered with. She'd even docked her dowry and made her bring a chest full of her little sister's old clothes. Han Yunqi knew all of this. Today, she was avenging little Yi and herself. Seeing Han Yuqi stop moving, Han Yunqi ordered cold, someone come, drag the eldest young master out and beat him viciously. Although she'd only brought little Chen Xiong with her, none of the Han family's page boys dared to slight her. They quickly went to prepare and drag Han Yuqi out. Let me go, Qin Wangfei, I'm begging you, spare me. I won't dare again. No matter how Han Yuqi begged, Han Yunqi remained indifferent. Since she'd made a big fuss today, she might as well make a bigger one. Everyone in the Han family would see clearly that a married daughter like her wasn't to be trifled with. As soon as Han Yuqi was taken out, the people outside all parted to form a path, surrounding the left and right sides. How could Han Yuqi rest peacefully on the bench? He wanted to get off immediately, but Han Yunqi said coldly, "Tie him to the bench for me. Be taught." Yes. The page boy's teeth were chattering, but he had no choice but to obey. Madame Shu chased after them. She had to lean on the wall to steady herself. She didn't even dare to look at her son. She glared at Han Yunqi with hatred in her eyes. She couldn't wait for this woman to die. Han Yunqi, you better not fall into this madam's hands one day. Otherwise, this madam will definitely tear you to pieces. Very quickly, Han Yuqi was tied tightly to the stool. 2 manservants, one on the left and one on the right, held large boards. 50 times, not one less. Beat him. Han Yunqi ordered coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, a plank was struck down. Just by hearing the sound, one could tell that he didn't use much strength. Stop. Han Yunqi coldly looked at the manservant. What, are you hungry? Why don't I let you eat a few paddles as well? The manservant was frightened. Without waiting for Han Yunqi to say anything, he immediately slapped Han Yuqi's butt with the board. It was a resounding slap. At the same time, Han Yuqi also cried out, learning from the previous example, the other manservant didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately followed up with a plank. Han Yuqi's cries were incomparably miserable. 50 paddles, one after another. Every hit was very heavy. Seeing this, everyone's hearts also pounded heavily. Madame Shu covered her mouth and supported herself against the wall. She didn't dare to look. In the quiet courtyard, other than the sound of the paddles, there was only Han Yuqi's miserable cries. It really was like a pig being slaughtered. Finally, the 50 paddles were all finished. The 2 manservants' hands were numb. Han Yuqi's butt was simply a bloody mess. It was a shocking sight. He had already fainted. Madame Shu rushed over. Seeing this, she was so distressed that she almost fainted. She hurriedly shouted, "Doctor, someone come, call a doctor." How could she still care about the storeroom key in Han Yunqi's hand? She ordered people to send the eldest young master back to his room while she urged the doctor. Her entire person seemed to have gone crazy. Seeing this, all the servants were dumbfounded. They had never seen Madame Shu so out of her wits. After Madame Shu and the eldest young master left, Han Yunqi looked at the surrounding crowd. With this look, everyone immediately lowered their heads and consciously retreated. Third Enyang and second Miss were hiding behind a big tree. They didn't show themselves nor did they leave. Third Enyang and her daughter heard that Han Yunqi had the storeroom key in her hand and rushed over. Who knew that they would run into the scene of Han Yunqi severely punishing the eldest young master. Madame Shu relied on her maternal family's power to act tyrannically for so many years. Someone should have come out long ago to teach her a lesson. However, they never thought that it would be Han Yunqi who would come out. One had to know that even though Han Yunqi was a legitimate eldest miss, she had always been timid and afraid of getting into trouble. She was a person who tolerated and retreated silently. Moreover, even if she became Qin Wangfei, she would only be a decoration. Second Miss Han Ruoxue looked at Han Yunqi's face from afar and a trace of jealousy flashed through her eyes. She said in a low voice, "Mother, her face has really recovered." Han Ruoxue was the Han family's most beautiful daughter. However, now that the poisonous scar on Han Yunqi's face was gone, her face directly surpassed Han Ruoxue's. On the day of the wedding, many people in the Han family had seen Han Yunqi's beauty and the servants had been talking about it for a long time. Han Ruoxue had never seen it, so she didn't believe it. However, now that she saw the real person, even she had to admit it. The rumors outside say that she knows how to detoxify and saved the young general. In my opinion, it might be true. Madame Li said faintly with a shadow in her eyes. If it wasn't true, why would the Supreme Court's official Ouyang be so afraid of her? What right did she have to arrogantly return to her maternal family with the identity of a Wangfei? When these words came out, Han Ruoxue's expression also became complicated. However, she quickly recovered and smiled. "Mother, do you think she came back to fight for the storeroom?" Madame Li snorted. "She's a married daughter. Even if she becomes the empress, she still doesn't have the right." Although Madame Li gave birth to a daughter, she spent a lot of effort to raise her. When it came to medical skills, she was considered the best in the Han family's generation. She had always been looking for a good candidate for her daughter to marry into the family. This way, Han Ruoxue would have the right to inherit the position of head of the household. Then why is the storeroom key in her hands? I'm sure she stole it from father's hands. She has this thought. Han Ruoxue said hatefully. Madame Li's eyes flashed with a complicated light. She looked at Han Yunqi for a long time before saying, "Shuer, you haven't visited Miss Mu in a long time, right?" Han Ruoxue nodded. Although Han Ruoxue and Mu Liu's relationship wasn't as close as Mu Liuyu and Princess Chongping's, they could still be considered good sisters. Han Ruoxue would always give Mu Liuyu some rare trinkets, making Mu Liuyu very happy every time. Of course, this was all taught to her by Madame Li. Madame Li said that getting close to Mu Liuyu was the same as getting close to Princess Chongping. With Princess Chongping as her backing, she was much stronger than Madame Shu, the Minister of Personnel. Ever since Han Yunqi married into the Duke of Qin's household, Han Ruoxue didn't dare to look for Mu Liuyu. She was afraid that if Mu Liuyu got angry, she'd be implicated. After all, she was Han Yunqi's younger sister. Regarding the matter of the general's household and the crown prince's strange illness, I think you should go check on Mu Liuyu, Madame Li said lightly. I'll do my best, Han Ruoxue replied seriously. Seeing that her mother was about to leave, she hurriedly stopped her. Mother, are we just going to let her go like this? Even if father gave her the key, it's still unreasonable. After all, she's married off. Let's go get it back. Madame Li stopped, her cold gaze slowly moving from Han Ruoshue's hand to Han Ruoshue's face. Seeing this, Han Ruoshue resentfully let go, knowing that her mother was angry. Madame Shu isn't worried, so why are you? Even if someone wants to take revenge, it shouldn't be us. Madame Li's tone was cold and strict. Ever since she was young, her mother had always been this cold. Han Ruoshue was already used to it. She lowered her head. Yes, daughter understands. Madame Shu's backing was strong, and this time, Han Yunqi beat up Han Yuqi for Han Yuni. With Madame Shu's personality, how could she let the seventh branch off so easily? How could she not go against Han Yunqi? If seventh Madame Helian Zuexiang was said to be patient, then Madame Li was the most low-key person. She was always sober and leisurely as a bystander, waiting for the fishermen to reap the benefits. Madame Li and her daughter left silently. Han Yunqi had already helped seventh Madame into the room. Yi was still unconscious. Han Yunqi touched his forehead to make sure that he didn't have a fever because of the wound infection. Only then did she relax. Qin Wangfei, today, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have known. Seventh Madame looked at her son lying quietly on the bed, then looked at Han Yunqi. She was choked with sobs and couldn't speak. Han Yunqi looked at seventh Madame and felt helpless. How could such a weak and patient mother protect Yi? She was afraid that this child would be the one to protect his mother. This time, she showed the storehouse key and taught Han Yuqi a lesson. Madame Shu wouldn't dare to touch the mother and daughter, at least for a short period of time. However, that was only temporary and not a long-term plan. The Han family's new head must be supported as soon as possible. Even if Yi was young, with the status of head of the family, those people wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. Unfortunately, she had a bet with Mu Liuyu first and didn't have time to fight a battle of wits and courage with these people. If it was Han Konggan's idea, Han Konggan was already locked up. Madame Shu and Madame Li probably wouldn't agree. Han Yunqi indicated that seventh Madame didn't need to say more and sat down first. She pondered for a moment and said, "Little Chen Xiong, stay here and take care of Master Ji Yu." "Yes, mistress, don't worry. With this servant here, I definitely won't let anyone bully seventh young master." Little Chen Xiong immediately accepted the order. This girl was getting smarter. Hearing this, seventh Madame was overjoyed and hurriedly got up to kneel in thanks. "Many thanks, Princess Consort. Yi is able to receive Princess Consort's care. It's his good fortune from 3 lifetimes." Han Yunqi personally supported her and earnestly said, "Seventh Madame, take good care of Yi. Sometimes, when it's time to be tough, you have to be tough." That Madame Shu isn't the official wife. Although Han Yuqi is the eldest young master, he's also a concubine's son like Yi. There's nothing to be afraid of. In the future, little Chen Xiong will live here. If there's anything, just tell her, understand? Seventh Madame was so moved that she didn't know what to say. She nodded repeatedly, her tears almost falling down in bunches. Han Yunqi gave little Chen Xiong a few more instructions before leaving. Seeing that the sky was almost dark, she still hadn't finished today's business. The manservant who had been guarding the door was still waiting outside the courtyard, not daring to leave. Seeing Han Yunqi come out, he hurriedly came forward to flatter her. "Princess Consort, this humble one has been waiting for you." This manservant could be considered quick-witted. Han Yunqi nodded. "Lead the way." This time, she had indeed come for the storehouse. However, she didn't want to obtain the things in the storehouse. Instead, she wanted to check if the storehouse had the 3 snake poisons she was looking for. Under the manservant's guidance, Han Yunqi quickly arrived at the Han family's storehouse. Chapter 86. The Han family's storehouse was located behind the 1,000-herb garden where Han Konggan lived. It was a secret underground storehouse and the entrance was guarded by specialized storehouse guards. These guards were not manservants but all of them knew martial arts. Even if Han Konggan was imprisoned, they would still guard this place and wait for the next family head to appear. The storehouse was a forbidden area and no one was allowed to casually approach it. The manservant stopped from afar and said, "Princess Consort, please go ahead. This lowly one will wait for you here." Han Yunshi walked over and a guard immediately came forward to stop her. "Who are you? How dare you approach the storehouse without permission?" "Di daughter Han Yunshi replied coldly. The guard took a closer look and finally recognized Han Yunshi. However, he still did not give her any face. "Since you are the eldest miss, you should know the rules of the Han family." Han Yunshi calmly took out the storehouse key. Seeing the storehouse key is equivalent to seeing the family head. You should be clear about this. Seeing this, the guard was shocked and several other guards also came over. They recognized that it was indeed the storehouse key. Indeed, seeing the storehouse key was equivalent to seeing the family head. As servants, they had no right to question Han Yunshi about how she got the key. They could only respectfully let her in. Han Yunshi walked over confidently. Since she was young, she had heard that the Han family's storehouse was very big. However, she only knew how big it was when she personally walked in. Using the key to open the storehouse door, she found that it was divided into two storehouses. On the left was the money storehouse. It stored gold ingots and silver ingots. It was the Han family's reserve money and would never be used unless it was absolutely necessary. On the right was the medicine storehouse. Han Yunshi had just reached the door when the strong smell of medicinal herbs hit her face. This familiar smell made her feel much better. This medicine storehouse was like a small library. Towering medicine shelves stood in great numbers. On the side of each shelf, there was a classification of medicinal herbs. The names of the herbs were written in front of the drawers on the shelves. The classification was clear and detailed, making it easy to find. Soon, Han Yunshi found the category of poisons. The Han family was not a poison sect, but a medical family. The poisons here were not real poisons, but poisonous herbs that could be used as medicine. Han Yunshi didn't know if she didn't look for it, but when she did, she was shocked. The Han family's hidden medicine was much better than what Han Yunshi had imagined. Unfortunately, she searched every drawer in the poisons category, and even all the secret chambers, but she only found the 7 common snake poisons. She didn't find the other 3 poisons she was looking for. From the looks of it, the 3 snake venoms did not come from the Han family. This lead was broken again. Han Yunshi closed the last drawer and exhaled lightly. At this moment, she caught sight of a study table on the side. On top of the table was a book that was halfway through its pages. Han Yunshi walked over and flipped to the cover. She saw the Han family medical canon written in large letters. So this was where it was. After hesitating for a bit, Han Yunshi put the Han family medical canon into her sleeve. Her lips curled into a sly smile as she said to herself, "It's too early to give it to Yi-er. I'll keep it for now." On the way out of the storehouse, Han Yunshi kept her head down as she pondered. The Han family could be eliminated as a suspect. Now she could only see if Mu Qingwu had found any clues. She really hoped to see Jiyu Beiyu as soon as possible. With his connections, she wouldn't have to work so hard. Not long after leaving the storehouse, the manservant guarding the door caught up to her. "Princess Consort, are you going back to the palace? This little one will send you out." Han Yunshi looked at him and softly said, "What is your name?" Replying to Princess Consort, "This little one's name is Wang Xiaoxi. I'm the supervisor at the main gate. This little one knows everything that goes in and out of the palace." Wang Xiaoxi quickly replied. Han Yunshi was worried that she didn't have anyone she could use. She didn't expect that such a useful person would take the initiative to send her. She said in a low voice, "Take care of 7th Madam's room. Do you understand?" As she said this, she threw a silver ingot over. "Go drink wine with your brothers. This princess knows the way to the Han family." Wang Xiaoxi was a smart person. Taking the silver ingot, he was overjoyed and repeatedly thanked her. "Many thanks for Princess Consort's praise. This little one is willing to be a dog or horse for Princess Consort." Han Yunshi walked away, but Wang Xiaoxi was still standing there, immersed in joy. After being a gatekeeper for so many years, he finally had a chance to be promoted. How could he not be happy? Not to mention Qin Wangfei's noble status, she had the storehouse key in her hands. In the future, wouldn't she be able to make whoever she wanted be the head of the household? In the struggles of large families, it was important for a small character like him to choose a side. As long as he followed Qin Wangfei, he would definitely not choose the wrong side in the struggle for the position of the head of the household. After choosing a side, he naturally had to rope in some brothers to work for 7th Madam. Thinking of this, Wang Xiaoxi happily put away the silver ingot and hurriedly left. At this time, Madame Li walked out from the flower bushes. She looked at the entrance of the storehouse not far away and then looked at Wang Xiaoxi's back. Her lips curled into a contemptuous smile. The struggle for the position of the head of the Han family was very urgent, but Han Yunqi and Mu Liu's bet was even more urgent. It was only a month's time, and almost 10 days had passed. Han Yunqi returned to the estate and waited for 2 days. She assumed that Jiyu Beiyu would have time to see her by now, but she received tragic news instead. Esteemed Wang Fei, the steward of the Jiyu estate said that Imperial physician Jiyu won't leave the palace for a month. As for the details, this one couldn't ask him, the pageboy reported. What? Han Yunqi exclaimed. The pageboy thought she didn't understand and hastened to add, the steward of the Jiyu estate said that Imperial physician Jiyu is in the palace and won't be leaving for a month. This one asked why, but the steward said he didn't know. Han Yunqi's face had long turned ghastly white. If Imperial physician Jiyu didn't leave the palace for a month, then Emperor Tianhui's illness must have worsened. The steward might not know such things, and even if he did, he wouldn't dare to say it. This is bad, Han Yunqi muttered to herself. After some hesitation, she went out to General Mu's estate. Esteemed Wang Fei, this one was just about to report when you showed up. Mu Qingwu was surprised, but secretly rejoiced in his heart. Thank goodness Liu Yu had been invited out by a good friend. Otherwise, who knew what kind of trouble she'd stir up when she saw Qin Wangfei? Did you find out anything about the matter you wanted to investigate last time? Han Yunqi asked. Last time, they'd analyzed the 10,000 snake poison's properties and frequency of use. The poisoner was either a member of the Mu family or someone who frequently visited the Mu family. Even if it was a member of the Mu family, someone had to deliver the poison frequently. Mu Qingwu felt helpless. Esteemed Wang Fei, this one has thoroughly investigated. Before Mu Qingwu could finish, Han Yunqi saw the frown between his eyebrows and knew that there were no results. This lead had been cut off. How could this be? Their reasoning wasn't wrong. The 10,000 snake poison had to be used within a day of being concocted. Otherwise, it would have a color and smell. With Mu Qingwu's vigilance, it was impossible for him to not notice it. And to accumulate the poison, it would have to be used once every 2 or 3 days. No matter what, the poisoner must have a close relationship with the general's estate. However, they'd investigated and interrogated everyone, but they still couldn't find the culprit. Could it be that they'd missed out on some details or overlooked someone? To find the traitor, there were only 2 ways. One was to continue investigating the suspects in the general's estate, and the other was to find the 3 rare snake poisons. The latter was the goal of Han Yunqi's trip. Han Yunqi took out the prescription list and handed it to Mu Qingwu. Young general, these are the other 3 snake poisons. They're extremely rare snake poisons. Not to mention the average pharmacy, even the majority of medical families may not have them. Perhaps, it would be faster to start with these 3 snake poisons. She had held back before, but now that she couldn't find Jiyu Beiyu, she could only pass this lead to Mu Qingwu. At least, Mu Qingwu's connections were wider than hers, so there was more hope. Mu Qingwu glanced at the prescription list and hesitated for a moment. But very quickly, he raised his head and looked at Han Yunqi with a magnanimous gaze. He asked directly, Esteemed Wang Fei, you didn't mention these 3 snake poisons earlier because you were afraid that my father and I would be biased, right? The sudden question caught Han Yunqi off guard. However, Mu Qingwu had asked the right question. She did have such thoughts. She and Mu Liuyu had made a bet for a month. The loser of the bet had to take off her outer clothes and run 1 round around Xuanwu Avenue. Neither she nor Mu Liuyu could bear the consequences of this. However, This kind of bet only had winners and losers. There was no tie. One of them was bound to lose. If the investigation completely relied on General Mu and the young general, the father and son could drag on and wait until a month later to find the traitor. This way, they wouldn't lose anything. Secondly, Mu Liuyu wouldn't lose. No matter what, Mu Liuyu was still General Mu's only daughter. Of course, she had to hold back and investigate on her own. Who knew that Jiyu Beiyu couldn't leave the palace? Since Mu Qingwu asked like this, Han Yunxi didn't have anything to hide. She revealed a calm smile and openly admitted it. Yes, who would have thought that the always humble Mu Qingwu would become very serious? His clear eyes stared at Han Yunxi as he seriously said, "Princess Consort, what kind of person do you think I, Mu Qingwu, am?" Seeing Mu Qingwu's stubborn and open eyes, Han Yunxi suddenly felt like she was measuring a gentleman's belly with her own caution. Still, she didn't think it was wrong to protect herself like this. "Young general, if your little sister loses, will you really be impartial and have her take off her clothes to run one round outside?" Han Yunxi seriously asked. Who would have thought that Mu Qingwu would not hesitate at all? "I will." Han Yunxi's heart gave a slight start. She didn't want to believe it, but Mu Qingwu's clear, bright eyes made it impossible for her to doubt him. "A few days ago, Father and I even tried to persuade her to come and apologize so we could forget about the bet. Unfortunately, that girl won't cry until she sees the coffin," Mu Qingwu said mildly. "So, you want to persuade me?" Han Yunxi asked with furrowed brows. "No, everyone has to pay the price for their own choices. Princess Consort, this is a bet between you and Liu Yu. Between you and this humble official, there is only the matter of investigating the case. Princess Consort, please be at ease. This humble official will do his best to cooperate," Mu Qingwu said seriously. Looking at Mu Qingwu, Han Yunxi's heart was filled with emotion. No wonder Mu Qingwu was able to control a large military force at such a young age. Despite being born into a noble family, he was so principled and straightforward. It was rare to see someone like him in Tianing's court. Han Yunxi knew that she could set her heart at ease for 100 years. "Young general, I'll believe you. First, find someone to investigate these 3 snake poisons as soon as possible. Secondly, as I see it, anyone who can get close to you should be investigated in secret. No matter their status, that includes your closest relatives," Han Yunxi said seriously. Hearing this, Mu Qingwu was stunned. "My closest relatives?" "Yes, young general. We've overlooked a very important point. The poisoner can borrow the hands of others, but it's very possible that the poisoner hasn't even realized it yet," Han Yunxi said bluntly. Chapter 87. If they were certain that the poisoner had close ties to the general's estate, then they couldn't rule out that possibility. Hearing Han Yunxi's words, Mu Qingwu finally understood. Esteemed Wang Fei's thoughts are truly meticulous. This official understands. Han Yunxi discussed a few more details with Mu Qingwu before leaving the general's estate. Unbeknownst to her, Long Feiye had arrived as soon as she'd left. This was Long Feiye's second visit to General Mu's estate after discovering that he was a spy in northern Li country. He was dressed in black robes as he sat domineeringly on the main seat in the main hall. His features were cold and indifferent, like a king who ruled over the world. The entire hall was quiet. Only General Mu was standing in the middle of the hall. Soon enough, Mu Qingwu hurried over. As soon as he entered, he gave a standard military salute and said, "This official greets Your Highness Duke of Qin." Long Feiye gestured for him to dispense with the formalities before asking cold, "Did Han Yunxi just leave?" Han Yunxi. It had to be said that General Mu and his son both found it strange to hear those 3 words from His Highness Duke of Qin's lips. In their memories, the Duke of Qin had never called a woman by her name. Of course, it was impossible for him to call Han Yunxi his beloved consort. Like everyone else, he used to call her Qin Wangfei. Since when had he changed his way of addressing her? Despite their curiosity, neither General Mu nor Mu Qingwu had the guts to ask. In front of His Highness Duke of Qin, they felt even more pressure than Emperor Tianhui. The princess consort just left. This is the new clue she sent over. She sent a new message, Mu Qingwu said as he handed over the list of ingredients he'd just received. These are the 3 snake poisons that esteemed Wang Fei didn't mention before. She said they're extremely rare, so very few people in Cloud Realm continent have them. Long Feiye nodded and asked, have the results of the investigation into the suspects in the estate come to fruition? General Mu blushed with shame. Reporting to Your Highness, there has been no results so far. Expand the scope of the suspects and continue to investigate, Long Feiyi said as a glint flashed in his eyes. He whispered, especially women. Hearing this, General Mu and the young general were both shocked. The Duke of Qin had been ordered by the Emperor to track down the spies of the Northern Li Kingdom. So far, all of the spies he had found were women. This meant that Mu Qingwu's poisoning had something to do with this matter. In other words, it was very likely that there were spies from Northern Li in the general's mansion. One had to know that the general's residence was a very sensitive place. Many military secrets came from there. Things were getting serious. At this time, how could General Mu still care about protecting Mu Liuyu? He had already forgotten about the bet between Mu Liuyu and Han Yunxi. He made a prompt decision. Rest assured, Your Highness Duke of Qin. This general will definitely expand the scope of the investigation, regardless of whether they are close or distant. Mu Qingwu had always known that his father would side with Liu Yu. Seeing this opportunity, he said seriously, Father, Qin Wangfei suspects that the poisoner might have used someone else's hands. In this child's opinion, we can't miss out on the few cousins who frequently visit. He hesitated for a moment, then added, of course, Liu Yu's side also needs to be investigated. If this was any other time, General Mu would have angrily rebuked Mu Qingwu for being muddle-headed. How could his blood-related little sister have evil intentions and be so careless? However, under these circumstances, General Mu didn't dare to lose his temper in front of His Highness Duke of Qin. After thinking it over, he looked at the Duke of Qin and said, Esteemed Wang Fei's words are reasonable. Long Fei Yi looked pensive, then quickly nodded and put away the list of ingredients. This prince will take care of these 3 snake poisons. As for the rest, you must speed up. Yes. General Mu and his son said in unison, respectfully accepting the order. Long Fei Yi stood up to leave, but when he reached the door, he suddenly stopped. He didn't turn back, but his voice was as cold as ever. This prince heard that Han Yunxi and eldest Miss Mu made a bet. What? His Highness Duke of Qin actually knew about the bet between Han Yunxi and Mu Liuyu? In order to reduce the impact, General Mu had already issued a gag order. None of the servants who knew of this matter were allowed to spread it around. How did His Highness Duke of Qin know? Reporting to Your Highness, this matter is true. My daughter is insensible and daring. This general will definitely teach her a good lesson. General Mu hurriedly explained. No matter what, he would do his best to prevent this from happening. Even if it didn't work, he would force Liu Yu to apologize. He couldn't bear the consequences of this kind of lose-lose situation. Your Highness, please don't take it seriously. This general will definitely. Unexpectedly, before General Mu could finish speaking, Long Fei Yi interrupted him. This prince is actually looking forward to the results. As he spoke, he didn't ask any more questions and strode away. His figure quickly disappeared from the courtyard. General Mu stood rooted to the ground in a daze. After a while, he recovered his wits and slowly turned to look at Mu Qingwu. You, just now, did you hear what His Highness Duke of Qin said? Mu Qingwu was also very surprised. He muttered, His Highness said that he's actually looking forward to the results. General Mu's face paled and he panicked. What does that mean? Could it be that His Highness Duke of Qin also wants to see Liu Yu take off her outer clothes and run a lap around Xuanwu Street? Thinking up to here, Great General Mu immediately rejected his own thoughts. He was definitely overthinking things. His Highness Duke of Qin wouldn't have the leisure to make things difficult for a little girl like Liu Yu for no reason at all. Could it be that he wants to see Qin Wangfei take off her outer clothes and run a lap around Xuanwu Street after losing? No. General Mu slapped himself on the head. That's even more impossible. If Qin Wangfei really did run, Then she would be slapping His Highness Duke of Qin's face. General Mu was furious. He glared at Mu Qingwu. "What is your highness hoping for?" "The result of the bet," Mu Qingwu said timidly. "Whose result?" General Mu asked again. Mu Qingwu had nothing to say. General Mu was both angry and anxious. He turned his head and whipped the air. "Mu Liuyu, when will that damned girl stop causing trouble?" Since His Highness Duke of Qin had already said so, no matter what he meant, General Mu couldn't let Mu Liuyu apologize or ask Qin Wangfei to take back the bet. When the time came, he really didn't know how to clean up the mess. Mu Qingwu saw that his father was so angry, so he said seriously, "Father, Liuyu has grown up. Let her take responsibility for the trouble she caused. The matter of the spy is very important. If it really is a spy from Northern Li and His Majesty blames us, we won't be able to explain ourselves." The situation had already reached this point, so what else could General Mu say? He looked irritably at Mu Qingwu. "Immediately draw up a list of names and investigate them one by one. If it really is someone from the Fu, this general won't let them off easily." At this time, Mu Liuyu didn't know that her father was so angry that he wanted to hit her. She was currently meeting with friends at the most famous Heavenly Fragrance tea garden on the outskirts of the capital. Of course, she was concerned about the progress of the case, but her father and brother didn't say anything. However, seeing her father's worried face all day, she could guess that there wasn't much progress in the case. 10 days had already passed, so there were only 18 days left. Based on the current situation, Han Yunqi's fate was more likely than not. Moreover, even if there was any big progress in the next 18 days, she wasn't afraid. In any case, her father and brother were helping with the investigation. She didn't believe that her father and brother wouldn't care about her life or death. No matter what, there would be a way to delay it until a month later. This time, not only did she want Han Yunqi to suffer the consequences of her own actions, she also wanted to use the cruel truth to tell Han Yunqi that having the title of Qin Wangfei in vain wasn't as good as having a good background. Being able to marry into the Duke of Qin's household wasn't something to be proud of. Thinking of this, Mu Liuyu couldn't help but chuckle. At this time, Han Ruoxue personally walked over with a pot of tea. Seeing this, she smiled and said, "My eldest miss, what are you thinking about? You look so happy. Tell little sister and let me have some fun too." As she spoke, she placed the tea on the table and sat down cross-legged. She propped her chin up with both hands and looked like she was waiting for Mu Liuyu to speak. Mu Liuyu glanced at her and chuckled a few times before calming down. "Nothing, what could it be?" Han Ruoxue looked at her ambiguously. "You're smiling so much that flowers are blooming on your face. Could it be that you're thinking of some families?" Before she could finish speaking, Mu Liuyu grabbed the teacup in front of her and was about to throw it over. Han Ruoxue hurriedly stopped her. All right. I won't ask anymore. I'll slap myself." Han Ruoxue made a show of slapping herself a few times. Before she came, she assumed that this eldest miss would dislike her because of Han Yunqi. She didn't expect her attitude to be the same as before. Still, it made sense. Mu Liuyu had been willing to befriend her not only because she'd given her many generous gifts, but also because she could find out a lot about Han Yunqi from her. Mu Liuyu glanced at her and smiled again. "That's more like it." Seeing that Mu Liuyu was in a good mood, Han Ruoxue mused to herself that she'd made the right appointment today. Come. This servant will brew another pot of good tea as an apology to eldest miss." Han Ruoxue jokingly imitated a servant's tone. Mu Liuyu arched an eyebrow. "All right, this young miss will wait." So speaking, the two of them burst into laughter. Han Ruoxue opened up a canister of tea leaves and handed it over. "Smell it. Doesn't it smell good?" The people of Tianing country were addicted to tea, especially those in the capital. Tea houses of all sizes filled the city, while the outskirts were mostly tea houses. People like Mu Liuyu, who were very particular about the way of tea, rarely went to tea houses. The tea leaves and spring water from their own homes were much better than those from other tea houses. If they were in the mood for leisure, or if it wasn't convenient to discuss matters at home, they'd usually meet at a tea house in the outskirts. They'd use freshly picked tea leaves and spring water from the mountains to brew tea that was a level higher in color, fragrance, and taste. Strictly speaking, Mu Liuyu and Han Ruoxue were tea friends. When the two of them met, they'd always meet at a tea house. Han Ruoxue had given Mu Liuyu plenty of priceless teas. Mu Liuyu took a light sniff. As the fragrance of the tea entered her nose, she instantly felt refreshed. She closed her eyes to savor the aftertaste as she indicated for Han Ruoxue to brew the tea. Needless to say, the same tea leaves, water, and teapot could be brewed differently by different people. Han Ruoxue was an expert in this field, and Mu Liuyu liked to drink the tea she'd personally brewed. However, she didn't know that Han Ruoxue had learned her way of tea from her mother, Madame Li. Very soon, a cup of light green tea was delivered to Mu Liuyu. Mu Liuyu smelled the tea's fragrance first, then took a small sip before drinking it. After savoring the aftertaste, she praised repeatedly, "Wonderful, wonderful. I think I should invite Princess Changping over tomorrow and let her have a taste too." Hearing this, Han Ruoxue secretly rejoiced. She'd long wanted to use Mu Liuyu to get close to Princess Changping. Chapter 88. This wasn't the first time Mu Liuyu had brought up Princess Changping in front of Han Ruoxue. "Really? You've already promised me so many times," she muttered, feeling wronged. Mu Liuyu smiled. "Didn't I get delayed by matters the last few times? How about this? I'll have Princess Changping invite you to the plum blossom meet in a few days. How about that?" At these words, Han Ruoxue's face lit up with joy. "Liuyu, you're not allowed to make me happy. The plum blossom meet was held once every 3 years. A few years ago, it was organized by Princess Changping to enjoy the plum blossoms and tea. All the participants were women who were personally selected by Princess Changping before she sent out invitations. Most of the people invited were the daughters of Tianing country's nobles. Once invited, it proved that one had received the approval of Tianing's upper-class circles. Thus, many women yearned for this gathering. Before Han Konggan had been imprisoned, the Han family was considered a big family. Unfortunately, they were now commoners and couldn't be called nobles, so Han Ruoxue had no chance at all. "Is it not enough for me to swear? You don't trust me that much," Mu Liuyu said, a crafty glint flashing through her eyes. No need. I'll just trust you." Han Ruoxue was so excited that she didn't suspect Mu Liuyu's sudden invitation at all. Of course, excitement aside, Han Ruoxue didn't forget the purpose of this trip. She joked, "Actually, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just that you haven't asked me out for so long that I thought our eldest Miss Mu had forgotten about me." At these words, Mu Liuyu seemed to be in low spirits. She had just picked up her second cup of tea when she put it down again. She gave Han Ruoxue a meaningful look and said coldly, "You still dare to blame me? I was almost tormented to death by that eldest miss of your family during this period of time." Han Ruoxue knew her chance had come. After a moment's hesitation, she said in a low voice, "She's Qin Wangfei now." Mu Liuyu gave a cold snort. "So what if she's Qin Wangfei? The Duke of Qin has to acknowledge her." "I heard." Han Ruoxue started, then stopped. "What did you hear?" Mu Liuyu frowned, and her face turned ugly. She hated this kind of hesitation. "I heard that she saved your brother. A while ago, the streets and alleys were all talking about how her medical skills are amazing and how she's hiding them. There were even many nobles who went to the gates of the Duke of Qin's residence to seek treatment." Han Ruoxue asked timidly. Mu Liuyu's eyes flashed with displeasure. After all, these things involved the assassination of her brother. Now the murderer had not been found, and the person who poisoned her brother had not been found. Her father had repeatedly told her not to make it public. Besides, Han Yunqi did contribute to these things, but she didn't want to talk about it. However, seeing Han Ruoxue's shocked expression, Mu Liuyu was displeased. "Liuyu, is it true? Is Han Yunqi really that powerful? She used to be a good-for-nothing at home. Could it be that she had been pretending all this time? She's a genius." Han Ruoxue's face was full of exaggeration. Seeing that Mu Liuyu was unmoved, she continued, "If that's the case, then we really underestimated her. This girl, Before she could finish, Mu Liuyu couldn't take it anymore. She cut her off lung and cursed, "Genius my ass." Han Ruoxue hurriedly looked around in a panic. "Eldest miss, shush. You don't know how to choose your words. If someone hears you, the main character of tomorrow's rumors in the capital will be you." Mu Liuyue's little face was gloomy. She pursed her lips unhappily. Han Yunxi only knows how to cure poisons. She can't be considered a genius doctor. There are many people in the world who know how to cure poisons. At this point, Mu Liuyu was still unwilling to give up. She added, "What can she do to cure poisons? As long as there's an antidote, anyone can cure poisons, okay?" However, Han Ruoxue was shocked. "So your brother was poisoned? Didn't you say he was stabbed?" "There's poison on the assassin's sword," Mu Liuyu said again. "So it's like that, but why are there rumors saying that she was locked up in the heavenly prison? Then she was released and the Supreme Court Chancellor changed. What's going on?" Han Ruoxue questioned closely. Seeing the hesitation in Mu Liuyue's eyes, she knew that there must be a secret. Thus, she added, "I also heard from a few sisters that Duke Qin was biased towards her. They said that Duke Qin didn't ask who was in the wrong and personally went to the heavenly prison to get her out." Duke Qin was biased towards her? When Han Ruoxue said this, Mu Liuyu slammed the table heavily. "Nonsense. Han Yunxi doesn't deserve it." Han Ruoxue looked at her in astonishment, her eyes revealing a look of suspicion. Mu Liuyu didn't like this kind of gaze. She took a deep breath and said coldly, "Here, I'll tell you a secret. You mustn't spread it out. Otherwise, don't come and see me in the future." Han Ruoxue hurriedly nodded. "Liuyu, it's not like you don't know. From what I've heard, it's only in and not out." Mu Liuyu hesitated for a moment before nodding. She lowered her voice and said, "Actually, my brother was poisoned with 2 types of poison." "What?" Han Ruoxue exclaimed. She was indeed very surprised. "Sha." Mu Liuyu glared fiercely at her. Han Ruoxue hurriedly covered her mouth, indicating that she didn't dare to say any more. Mu Liuyu then continued, "The first type was cured by Han Yunxi. Afterwards, my brother had a relapse and his high fever didn't stop. Han Yunxi was then convicted. Who knew that the second type of poison was the one that had been dormant for many years? She just happened to know how to cure it, so she cured it and was not convicted." As Mu Liuyu spoke, she deliberately lied in order to slander Han Yunxi. Actually, she just happened to know how to cure those 2 types of poison. From the beginning to the end, Duke of Qin didn't appear. Duke of Qin doesn't care about her life or death. Don't listen to the rumors outside. A complicated look flashed across Han Ruoxue's eyes. Of course, she knew that Mu Liuyu wasn't speaking the truth. However, the fact that Han Yunxi saved the young general probably couldn't be faked. So that's how it is. "Haha, I didn't expect her to know how to cure poisons," Han Ruoxue muttered. Mu Liuyu was very uncomfortable when she heard this. She felt that Han Ruoxue seemed to be looking at Han Yunxi in a different light. A scheming look flashed across her eyes. She said in a low voice, "Ruoxue, there's one more thing that I'll only tell you. You must keep it a secret." "Of course, don't worry." Seeing Mu Liuyue's secretive look, Han Ruoxue was very nervous. She originally came to ask about the young general and didn't expect to find out more. If she had known earlier, she would have invited Mu Liuyu for tea. Mu Liuyu lowered her voice especially low. "Ruoxue, your father's imprisonment actually has something to do with Han Yunxi." The moment she said this, Han Ruoxue was shocked. She stared at Mu Liuyu with wide eyes. "What are you looking at? Are you dumb?" Mu Liuyu waved her hand in front of her and pulled her closer. She continued, "I also heard about this when I entered the palace a few days ago. Although I don't know if it's true or not, it's better for you to be careful." "What exactly happened?" Han Ruoxue panicked. "I heard that the crown prince's illness was treated by Han Yunxi with the help of imperial physician Ji Yu. Han Yunxi even completely denied your father's diagnosis," Mu Liuyu said. "The emperor announced to the world about the crown prince's illness. He only said that Han Konggan had misdiagnosed the crown prince and that he had been ill for a long time. As for the truth, No one was very clear. However, what kind of person was Mu Liu Yu? She already knew the truth. Of course, she wouldn't tell Han Ruoxue the truth. She would only add fuel to the fire and ruin Han Yunqi's reputation. Seeing that Han Ruoxue was in a daze, Mu Liu Yu lowered her voice. Han Yunqi is up to no good. Han Ruoxue had always wanted to find a husband to marry into the Han family and become the next head of the Han family. With her instigation, Han Ruoxue would hate Han Yunqi to death. So you're saying that she was the one who harmed father? Han Ruoxue said angrily. Only then did Mu Liu Yu return to her seat. She personally poured a cup of tea for Han Ruoxue. She didn't continue speaking and only nodded her head. Great. No wonder she won't let us visit father. No wonder the key to the Han family's storeroom is in her hands. She's a married daughter. Does she still want to come back and fight for the family's inheritance? Han Ruoxue couldn't remain calm. She was panting with anger. How could she have the leisure to drink tea? She had to immediately go back and tell her mother about this. Liu Yu, this is a serious matter. I have to go back. Han Ruoxue stood up and said seriously. Mu Liu Yu had already achieved her goal. She nodded her head and reminded her in a low voice, you must not betray me. Don't worry, I'll go first. Han Ruoxue left in a hurry and forgot about the tea leaves on the side. These tea leaves were carefully selected by her mother. Every time she drank tea with Mu Liu Yu, she would give her a jar. After successfully instigating discord, Mu Liu Yu's mood improved greatly. She didn't care about the tea leaves. She drank a few more cups of tea before lazily getting up. She wanted to soak in the tea-hot spring and relax. She thought that the Han family would soon find trouble with Han Yunqi. Princess Changping should have received her letter by now and would return to the capital in a few days. When that time came, Han Yunqi would definitely be too busy to find the traitor. That afternoon, Han Ruoxue returned to the Han family and went straight to Madame Li. Mother, Han Yunqi has the heart to fight for the family property. I think we should go find Madame Shu to discuss this. No matter what, we have to get the storehouse key back first. Han Ruoxue was still anxious. This matter concerned her position as head of house. However, Madame Li was only a little surprised and wasn't as flustered as Han Ruoxue. So it can be said that she saved the crown prince. Haha, no wonder she was so arrogant. Even official Ouyang had to yield. Madame Shu probably knows the inside story. With these words, Han Ruoxue was enlightened. If Madame Shu wasn't afraid, how could she have let Han Yunqi get beaten up for nothing that day? But even if she has a backing, so what? How can a married daughter take the house key? This doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Han Ruoxue said seriously. Madame Li looked her daughter up and down, her eyes full of disdain. Seeing this, Han Ruoxue wanted to explain herself, but Madame Shu reprimanded her. With your personality, how are you going to do big things in the future? How many times have I told you, calm down, calm down? When have you ever listened to me? Han Ruoxue finally calmed down and resentfully lowered her head. She remembered her mother's previous scolding. Madame Shu definitely wouldn't let this matter go, so they didn't need to show their faces in public. Madame Li allowed Han Ruoxue to stand there with her head lowered. She calmly brewed a cup of tea and drank it. After a few cups of hot tea to warm her body, she said, "Did you find out what I asked you to ask today?" This time, the meeting with Mu Liu Yu was mainly about the young general. Of course, Han Ruoxue didn't forget about this matter, but she didn't understand. Didn't her mother ask about the young general because she wanted to know how confident Han Yunqi was? Now that everyone knew that Han Yunqi saved the crown prince, then what did the young general matter? I asked, and it's pretty much the same as the rumors outside, Han Ruoxue said lightly. I said, I want you to ask for details, Madame Li said coldly, her fists clenched. If this girl in front of her wasn't her biological daughter, she probably would have been dragged out and beaten. Chapter 89. Facing her mother's sharp gaze, Han Ruoxue quivered and quickly replied. Mu Liu Yu said that Han Yunqi wasn't treating the young general's illness, but detoxifying it. As soon as she said this, Madame Li's fists suddenly stiffened, but she didn't say anything. The young general was ambushed by an assassin, and the sword was poisoned. Han Yunshi happened to know how to detoxify and saved the young general. However, who knew that the young general was also poisoned by a slow-acting poison, and Han Yunshi happened to discover it and detoxify it, Han Ruoshua said. As soon as she finished speaking, Madame Li's fists suddenly loosened. She was dumbfounded, her eyes were wide open, and she was completely stunned. Han Ruoshua was frightened and quickly went over to support her. "Mother, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Madame Li finally regained her senses, but her expression was still a little stiff. She shook her head. "No, nothing. Go and pour a cup of hot water for mother." Han Ruoshua quickly went to the side to pour some water. Madame Li let out a long sigh and calmed herself down. She looked at Han Ruoshua's back, and her eyes were dark and gloomy. After a while, she calmly said, "How did Han Yunshi discover that there was a slow-acting poison?" "Mu Liuyu didn't say in detail, so I didn't ask," Han Ruoshua answered. "How did the young general get poisoned?" "This slow-acting poison has to be administered slowly," Madame Li asked again. Han Ruoshua turned around. "Mother, I thought so too. There must be someone in the general's residence who wants to harm the young general. I didn't ask about this." Madame Li nodded and slowly drank a few mouthfuls of water. She casually asked, "Shui, did you deliver the spring tea I asked you to deliver to Miss Mu today?" Han Ruoshua finally remembered and lowered her head. I left in a hurry and forgot." Madame Li relaxed and asked again, "Those tea leaves aren't cheap. Where did you put them?" "I put them next to the tea table. Why don't I get someone to get them now and deliver them directly to the general's residence?" Han Ruoshua asked. "No need." Madame Li immediately rejected. "Forget it, just treat it as a gift for the fated person." Han Ruoshua was resentful, but she didn't dare to say anything even though she had made a mistake. "I'm tired and want to sleep for a while. You can go down," Madame Li said indifferently as she lazily leaned against the high pillow. "Mother, should I take your pulse?" Han Ruoshua was very concerned. However, Madame Li only waved her hand and asked her to leave. Ever since she was young, her mother had always been strict and sometimes even cold. Han Ruoshua was already used to it. "Then have a good rest." She poured another glass of water and put it aside before leaving. As soon as Han Ruoshua left, Madame Li immediately sat up. Her originally silent face instantly changed. It was as gloomy as the dark clouds in the sky. Even her usually calm gaze became sharp. "Men," she said in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, a female guard in black walked out from behind a screen. "Immediately go to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea Garden and get that thing back. Also, get rid of all the snake venom in the cabin," Madame Li instructed seriously. "Yes. This subordinate understands." The maid in black accepted the order and immediately left. Madame Li sat for a long time and her sharp phoenix eyes slowly narrowed. Han Yunshi, Han Yunshi, this madam has really underestimated you. You actually dared to ruin this madam's good thing. You're so capable. This madam definitely won't let you stay." Time passed day by day. Unknowingly, another 3 days had passed. There were only 15 days left until a month. After handing over all the matters to Mu Qingwu, Han Yunshi didn't stay idle. These past few days, she didn't leave the house and hid in the study of Leisurely Cloud Pavilion to research the 10,000 snake poison. She didn't have the 10 snake venoms on hand, but when she took samples before, she put Mu Qingwu's blood sample that contained the 10,000 snake poison into the detoxification system. The detoxification system would automatically copy the poison and replenish the poison library. Han Yunshi had been pondering over the method of poisoning these past few days. The method of poisoning would greatly limit the person who poisoned it. For example, some poisons could easily react with other things, weakening the toxicity, or changing the color or smell. Thus, they could only be put in clear water. On the other hand, there were also some poisons that couldn't be put in clear water, or else it would be easily discovered. Han Yunshi pondered that it wouldn't be easy to put poison in the clear water that Mu Qingwu drank. Moreover, the water and kitchens, as well as the servants who served Mu Qingwu, had all been checked. There wasn't anything abnormal. Could it be that she was mistaken and the 10,000 snake poison wasn't put in clear water? According to the records in the detoxification system, the 10,000 snake poison could only be put in clear water. Moreover, once it was concocted, it had to be used within a day or else it would change the color and smell. However, no matter how intelligent the detoxification system was, it was still something that humans had researched. In the modern era, there wasn't any 10,000 snake poison. The records in the detoxification system were compiled from ancient books. It had to be said that the detoxification system had very strong abilities in detecting poisons and concocting antidotes. No matter how strong the brain of a genius was, it couldn't replace it. However, the detoxification system was still very weak when it came to concocting poisons. Perhaps there was a way to mix the 10,000 snake poison in another solution without affecting its toxicity and without causing any changes in its color or smell. Or perhaps the poisoner had done something while concocting the poison. Without changing the toxicity of the 10,000 snake poison, they changed some of the properties of the poison, causing the method of poisoning to change as well. Although this possibility was very low, because concocting 10,000 snake poison wasn't an easy task in the first place. It was even more difficult to upgrade and improve the 10,000 snake poison. However, after investigating for so long without finding any clues, Han Yunqi had no choice but to seriously consider this possibility. If it wasn't in clear water, then it should have been in Mu Qingwu's food. Besides the 3 meals a day, Han Yunqi quickly thought of something else: tea. The people of Tianing country were fond of drinking tea, especially those in the capital. Every household would prepare tea leaves and drink tea from morning to night. Could it be tea? Han Yunqi muttered to herself. She was about to call little Chen Xiong over when she suddenly remembered that she'd left Chen Xiong at the Han estate to protect 7th young master. She could only personally go out of the hibiscus courtyard and find a page boy to help her gather all kinds of tea leaves. Unexpectedly, as soon as she returned to the courtyard after instructing the page boy, she saw a familiar figure in the distance walking through the long corridor. That figure was so tall and proud, with an imposing aura. Yet his gait was so elegant and noble. From a distance, his figure made everything around him dim, making it impossible to ignore him even if one wanted to. In the silent afternoon corridor, such a handsome, cold man walked elegantly alone. If the silent scenery was a painting, then this elegant, handsome man was the immortal in the painting. It was him. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunqi watched and watched until her mind unconsciously wandered. Suddenly, the immortal in the painting disappeared. No! Long Fei Yi had suddenly disappeared. Han Yunqi recovered her senses, flabbergasted. Where did he go? She subconsciously took a few steps forward and looked around, but she still didn't see him. Han Yunqi recovered her senses and only felt that she hadn't seen this guy for a long, long time. The last time they met should have been at the tea house. She saw him, but he didn't see her. She had been worried that he'd peeped at the dregs that she'd hidden in the detoxification system when treating the crown prince. However, that guy still hadn't come to ask about that matter, so he probably didn't see anything. It was only the afternoon, but this guy came back so early. Actually, Han Yunqi was very clear on which day he came back, when he came back, and which day he didn't come back. Who told her to stand at the attic window and see the lights in his sleeping quarters? Where did this guy spend the night when he didn't come back? Why did he come back so early today? Why did he come back? Strange, she muttered to herself, but at the same time, she put away her curiosity. That guy had always been elusive, so it shouldn't be strange for him to suddenly disappear. However, just as Han Yunqi was about to continue walking forward, a low and cold voice sounded from behind her. Han Yunqi, are you looking for this prince for something? Han Yunqi jumped in fright and quickly turned around to look. She saw that the person who was clearly in front of her just now was now standing behind her. His tall and lofty figure was like a mountain blocking her back, causing her to feel an enormous pressure. Han Yunqi subconsciously took a step back, distancing herself from him to ensure her own safety. Of course, she was a little baffled. Your Highness, I wasn't looking for you. Then why are you standing here and looking around? Long Fei Yi questioned. When these words came out, Han Yunqi immediately felt awkward. She'd been discovered by him? She couldn't help but raise her head to look. Who knew that the moment she raised her head, she would meet Long Fei Yi's extremely disdainful and impatient gaze. What's the matter? This guy. She gave him a little bit of attention, and he really thought that he was the center of attention? All right, even though he was indeed the center of attention, Han Yunqi refused to admit it right now. Why did he always look at her with that kind of gaze? Could it be that she was still so unbearable in his eyes despite all her efforts? Han Yunqi, who had always disdained to prove herself to others and didn't mind other people's gazes, didn't realize that she minded this man's gaze very much at this moment. She only felt that it was an insult. The angrier she was, the brighter the smile on her face became. She smiled proudly. It's nothing. I think Your Highness has misunderstood. I was looking around here for someone else, not for Your Highness. When these words came out, Long Fei Yi's originally cold gaze suddenly turned frosty, causing the surrounding temperature to drop by several degrees. Humph, let's see how arrogant you can be. Han Yunqi ignored the coldness in his eyes and said, if Your Highness doesn't have any other matters, this concubine will be leaving first. As she spoke, she raised her chin and elegantly turned to leave. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Long Fei Yi spoke up. Wait, this prince still has matters to attend to. Han Yunqi abruptly stopped in her tracks and turned around, still smiling sweetly. Does Your Highness still have matters to attend to? Let's talk inside. Long Fei Yi didn't even spare her a glance as he turned to leave after saying these words. Han Yunqi thought that he would go to the bedchamber, but who knew that this guy would actually head in the direction of Leisurely Cloud Pavilion? Is there really a matter? Han Yunqi was suspicious and hurriedly followed after him. Long Fei Yi caught a whiff of an unpleasant smell as soon as he entered the door. Even though he had never entered a woman's room before, he knew that a woman's room should be clean. He unconsciously frowned and followed the smell inside. When he arrived at Han Yunqi's study, he saw several bowls of black smoky liquid on the large table. The foul smell was coming from these bowls. Long Fei Yi looked around the study and saw that it was dirty, messy. As a clean freak, he hated this kind of mess. However, he didn't know why he didn't leave immediately. Han Yunqi chased after him. She didn't expect this guy to come to the study. Chapter 90. Han Yunqi knew that the study was smelly, so she smiled awkwardly. Your Highness, please go outside. The smell in here is a bit unpleasant. It smells just as bad outside, Long Fei Yi said. Then let's go to the courtyard. Han Yunqi shrugged her shoulders. She wasn't the one who'd invited him here. As a doctor, she was a bit of a clean freak as well. But when she was focused on researching unfamiliar poisons, she didn't care about that at all. Right now, the study was passable, but in a day or two, it'd probably be dirtier than a garbage dump. Of course, once she finished researching, she could clean it up neatly and tidily. You're making poisons? Long Fei Yi had no intention of leaving. I'm just playing around out of boredom. Han Yunqi replied. Actually, the bowls of 10,000 snake poison on the table were the ones she'd extracted from the detox system yesterday afternoon and placed in clear water. Within a day, it had become like this. What kind of poison is this? Long Fei Yi asked again. 10,000 snake poison. Last time, I collected some of the poison from the Major General's blood. When I had nothing to do, I studied it a bit, Han Yunqi replied. She wasn't telling the truth, but she wasn't lying either. But as Long Fei Yi saw it, she was lying. It looked like this woman was busy with Mu Qingwu's matters. But why was she hiding it from him? Chu Shifeng said that she'd found Jiyu Beiyu twice, but Jiyu Beiyu couldn't leave the palace. Long Fei Yi didn't expose her on the spot, but unexpectedly found a place to sit down. Then what did you figure out? Han Yunqi looked over and saw that he was still as noble and clean as ever despite being surrounded by filthy, smelly medicinal dregs. He was like a god who'd descended from the heavens, with not a speck of dust on his body. What did he mean by this? Was he planning to keep talking? Still haven't figured out anything? Han Yunqi replied indifferently. She didn't give Long Fei Yi a chance to continue asking. Instead, she asked, Your Highness, you said that you still have something to do. What is it? Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi had just sat down when he stood up again. His tone was so cold that there was no trace of warmth. It's fine. As he spoke, he walked past her and left the leisurely cloud pavilion without looking back. That's it. Han Yunxi was really puzzled. When she reached the door, she saw that Long Fei Yi had already gone far away. What did this guy come here for? It's always so baffling. Long Fei Yi seemed to be walking slowly, but in fact, his figure was constantly moving. In just a moment, he had arrived at the entrance of the bedroom. Chu Shifeng, who was waiting by the door, was astonished. Your Highness, didn't you come back long ago? One had to know that he had very important information to report. With his master's temperament, how could he possibly be late? Moreover, judging from his complexion, he didn't seem to be in a good mood. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but pushed open the door and entered the rooms. Chu Shifeng followed behind him, so he didn't notice his furrowed brows. Damn it, I was in a rush to see Chu Shifeng, but I slowed my steps when I saw her in the courtyard. I even went so far as to go to her room. He hated this kind of thoughtless behavior. He hated the feeling of being out of absolute control. Seeing his master stop, Chu Shifeng followed him and murmured, Your Highness, there's news. Long Fei Yi finally recovered from his thoughts. He tilted his head, the lines of his face cold and mysterious. Which family? Long Fei Yi's efficiency went without saying. When he'd gotten Han Yunxi's prescription from Mu Qingwu, he'd immediately contacted his acquaintances in the medical community to conduct a secret investigation. Your Highness, those 3 snake poisons are truly rare. Only 3 families have all 3, but there are more than 10 families that have 1 or 2 of the poisons hidden in their homes, Chu Shifeng answered honestly. He felt that something was off about his master today, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Long Fei Yi waited until Chu Shifeng didn't continue. He immediately turned to look at him, his cool face covered in a layer of frost. What else? Chu Shifeng couldn't help but shiver as he said timidly, of the 3 families with snake poisons, one is Northern Li Country's Li clan, another is Western Jew's Imperial Pharmacy, and the third is Pill Fiend Valley. As for the remaining 10 or so families, we haven't had time to investigate them all. This subordinate has already ordered people to focus on Northern Li Country's Li family. I believe we'll have more detailed information very soon. Learning from his predecessor's mistakes, Chu Shifeng immediately added, Your Highness, 2 of the spies locked up in the secret prison have already starved to death. Only 2 are left alive. As this subordinate sees it, it won't be easy to get them to talk. Long Fei Yi nodded. Make arrangements. Your lordship will interrogate them personally. Upstairs in the leisurely cloud pavilion, Han Yunxi was leaning lazily against the window as she stared at the mysterious palace nearby with furrowed brows. The page boy hadn't delivered the tea leaves yet, and little Chen Xiong wasn't home. She had nothing better to do, so she wandered upstairs to lean against the window and stare blankly. Soon enough, she saw Chu Shifeng emerge from his quarters. His footsteps hurried away as if he had urgent business. Just what was Long Fei Yi busy with all day? He held a high position in Tianning country. A sneeze from him could shake the entire Tianning court. But he rarely went to court to discuss matters, much less entered the palace. Could it be that the matter of the Northern Li spies hasn't ended yet? Han Yunxi was lost in thought when a guard arrived with the tea leaves. In the hibiscus courtyard, all the servants were Long Fei Yi's personal guards. There wasn't a single servant girl. Long Fei Yi had only given her little Chen Xiong, but since the girl wasn't here, she had to share Long Fei Yi's bodyguards. To reply Wang Fei, the page boy from the kitchens delivered these. The guard carried a large pile of tea leaves as he respectfully waited by the courtyard door. He didn't dare to enter. Help me bring them to the study, Han Yunxi shouted from upstairs. But the guard only replied, to reply esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin has decreed that no one is allowed to take half a step into the leisurely cloud pavilion. Han Yunxi gave a start, thinking she'd heard wrong. What? To reply esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin has decreed that no one is allowed to take half a step into the leisurely cloud pavilion. Only then did Han Yunxi understand. She angrily blurted out, Why? The guard had no idea that Chu Shifeng had issued the order not too long ago. Actually, It wasn't just Chu Shifeng who'd seen His Highness sitting on the roof of his sleeping quarters that day. Nobody knew what had happened to him. This subordinate doesn't know. I'll have to trouble esteemed Wang Fei to come get the tea leaves yourself, the guard said as he placed the items by the door and turned to leave. Han Yunxi rolled her eyes. Long Fei Yi, you miser. Without a choice, she could only go downstairs to get the tea leaves herself. The tea leaves weren't heavy, but there were many different types. Adding them all together, it took her 3 trips to get everything. The page boy from the kitchens was very reliable. He'd gathered all the types of tea leaves that could be drunk and sorted them out very clearly. Black, green, white, and dark teas were the 4 main types of tea. Each type was further divided into different varieties based on where they'd come from. In total, there were over 50 jars of tea leaves. Different types of tea had differences in soil, water quality, climate, degree of roasting, preservation methods, and other conditions. The tea leaves all had different components and tasted completely different as well. Of course, only a very experienced tea fanatic could taste these differences. Han Yunxi loved tea too, but she wasn't a top-notch expert. Of course she couldn't taste them all. But she had the detox system. The detox system's pharmaceutical system could analyze the various components of Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine was known as herbal medicine in ancient times and consisted of plant medicines, animal medicines, and mineral medicines. Naturally, tea leaves counted as a type of plant medicine as well. Han Yunxi took a leaf from each of the 50 different types of tea leaves and steeped another 50 cups of tea. After putting them all into the detox system, she went to sleep. Sleeping was when one's consciousness was at its most relaxed and undisturbed. It was also when the detox system was at its most efficient. Perhaps it was too much work, but Han Yunxi didn't wake up until the morning of the next day. What were the results? Han Yunxi was very disappointed. She didn't think that whether it was the tea leaves or the tea water, the various components couldn't match the 10,000 snake poison. In other words, it was impossible to mix the 10,000 snake poison into the tea leaves or tea water. Once mixed in, either the toxicity would immediately appear and the tea would go bad, or the toxicity would be affected. After long-term consumption, it wouldn't be detected as 10,000 snake poison anymore. Han Yunxi sat among the pile of tea leaves in the study. Her beautiful brows were tightly knitted. Could it be that she was wrong again and the poison wasn't put in through the tea leaves? If it wasn't water or tea leaves, then what else could it be? She had asked Mu Qingwu before. Mu Qingwu usually didn't have any snacks other than the 3 normal meals. Clear water and tea were the only 2 kinds of drinks. Of course, when she went to the general's estate that day, the first thing she checked was Mu Qingwu's things. She had checked the tea leaves in both the estate and the military, but there wasn't anything out of the ordinary. After sleeping for a long time, her head was heavy. Looking at the messy pile of things on the desk, Han Yunxi couldn't help but feel vexed. In the end, where did she go wrong? Which detail did she miss? Including today, there were still 14 days until a month. In these few days, there was no news from Mu Qingwu's side. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi's brows furrowed even tighter. The corners of her eyes sank as she stared at the desk for a long time. Her entire person became very, very solemn. Her face was written that strangers should stay away. Yes, her mood was bad. After an unknown amount of time, she suddenly stood up and turned to leave. She decided to go out to get some fresh air and visit Han Yuni in the Han family. In the Han family's Cloudwater Pavilion, little Chen Xiong and 7th concubine were doing handiwork in the courtyard. Regardless of whether Han Konggan was present or not, Xu Nei was in charge of the household accounts. The monthly allowance given to each branch was limited. 7th concubine's side was even more docked. 7th concubine had no choice but to secretly do some handiwork to supplement her expenses. Although 7th concubine was favored by Han Konggan, she always swallowed her anger and gave in whenever she could. In fact, Han Konggan had always known that Xu Nei was unfair. Helpless, he was afraid of Xu Nei's maternal family's power and could only wrong 7th concubine. Perhaps it was because 7th concubine didn't fight that Han Konggan was willing to come to her place. 7th concubine, just you wait. When Her Highness Wang Fei makes our little young master the official wife, You'll be in charge of this family. Every dog has its day. I'll definitely help you think of a way to properly deal with Madame Shu. Little Chen Xiong spoke very seriously, but seventh concubine's face was full of fear. Sha. Chen Xiong, what are you saying? Lower your voice. Little Chen Xiong looked at the sky helplessly. She was on the verge of collapse. These days, she had persuaded seventh concubine many times and gave her plenty of confidence. But who knew that seventh concubine was still like this? She was so cautious that she was afraid of offending Shunei and getting into trouble. Little Chen Xiong put down her handiwork and took a deep breath. She stood up and said seriously, "Seventh concubine, the storehouse key is in my master's hands. What are you afraid of? That day, you saw my master deal with eldest young master with your own eyes, didn't you?" Chapter 91. Chen Xiong. Seventh Madam panicked and pulled her to sit down. Chen Xiong, you don't understand. It's better to avoid trouble. Yi is still young. I don't want anything, I just want him to grow up safely. If it wasn't for my master stopping him that day, would the young master still have a way out? How many times could his little body take a beating? Chen Xiong was furious. At this time, little Yi was lying on the windowsill, secretly watching his mother. His clothes were very old, washed white, and his trousers and sleeves were short. Although it wasn't as bright and well-fitting as other children's, it was especially clean and tidy, with an indescribable temperament. Hearing his mother's words, little Yi-er's tender little face gradually revealed a disappointed expression. He gritted his teeth and wanted to speak several times, but unfortunately, every time the words reached his mouth, he swallowed them back down. His mother's forbearance made him able to endure. He was the most sensible child, but ever since he became sensible, he had always been sullen. The more little Chen Xiong spoke, the angrier she became. Seventh Madam could only keep persuading her, and finally changed the topic. Little Chen Xiong didn't notice, and continued to talk about other things. Little Yi lowered his eyes in disappointment, pouted his little mouth, and slowly slid down from the windowsill. However, at this time, a familiar voice sounded. "Little Chen Xiong, see what delicious food I brought for you." This voice, little Yi-er's little head suddenly popped out from the windowsill, only to see that it was his big sister, Han Yunqi, who had saved him that day. She walked in with 2 big bags. It was her. Little Yi would never forget that bright and beautiful face, that pair of resolute eyes, and even more so that voice that he had only heard once. That day, he was so cold that he almost lost consciousness. With his back to everyone, he didn't know what happened behind him. He only heard her lecturing Han Yuchi. It wasn't loud at all, but it was domineering and powerful. When he was about to faint, she said, "Yi, don't be afraid. Big sister will definitely protect you." Even his father, whom he respected the most, and his mother, whom he loved the most, had never said such words to him. "Sis." Seeing Han Yunqi walk in, little Yi called out in a low voice. He was a little timid and cautious. He had many older sisters, but this was the first time he had called out this word. Han Yunqi was in a bad mood, so shopping was her first priority. She brought in 2 big bags of things. One was warm snacks, and the other was medicinal herbs for seventh concubine and Yi to nourish their bodies. "Master, you've finally come." Little Chen Xiong was very excited and immediately rushed over. If her master did not come, she would think that she had been abandoned. Seventh concubine hurriedly stood up and bowed. "Greetings to esteemed Wang Fei, esteemed Wang Fei." Before he could finish his sentence, Han Yunqi waved her hand. Forget it, forget it. Where's Yi? Hurry up and call him out. I've brought you delicious food." Little Yi was so excited when he heard this and was about to rush out, but he stopped before his mother said anything. "Esteemed Wang Fei, you've taken such good care of Yi and even let you spend money." Seventh concubine felt very guilty. Han Yunqi was already in a bad mood and came out to get some fresh air. When she heard seventh concubine's polite words, she immediately became impatient. "Seventh concubine, if you're going to be so polite, you can wait outside. We'll eat with Yi first." When she said this, seventh concubine was stunned. Little Yi-er, who was hiding at the side, couldn't help but burst into laughter. Who's laughing? Han Yunshi looked in the direction of the sound. Little Yi-er immediately hid. Unfortunately, Han Yunshi's sharp eyes still saw his little head that he didn't remember to hide. This boy was so brave that day. Was he shy today? And he was even playing hide-and-seek with her? Han Yunshi narrowed her eyes and warned little Chen Xiong and seventh concubine not to make a sound. She quietly walked to the windowsill and stuck her head out to take a look. Unexpectedly, she didn't see anyone. Han Yunshi was delighted. She looked inside the room and saw little Yi-er hiding behind the screen. He stuck his little head out to look at her from afar. His expression was adorably silly and timid, as if he wanted to come closer but didn't dare. Han Yunshi grinned and walked around the front door, pretending to run over. Little Yi-er was shocked and turned to run to the back door. This time, Han Yunshi was overjoyed. Little fool. She laughed and ran to the back to block him. Who knew that little Yi-er would be so fast? Just as Han Yunshi was about to reach the back door, he rushed out. Seventh concubine was about to call out to stop when little Chen Xiong immediately covered her mouth. It was rare for esteemed Wang Fei to be so playful, so how could she stop her? Han Yunshi grabbed nothing but air. She narrowed her eyes and laughed mischievously. Yi-er, let's see who runs faster. Seeing her laugh, little Yi-er pursed his lips. His eyes were adorable, and he ran further away, increasing the distance between them. Han Yunshi immediately chased after him. This time, she was even faster. Little Yi-er was frightened and turned to rush out of the courtyard. Who knew that he would bump into Madame Shu, who was just about to enter? Madame Shu screamed and stumbled back 2 steps, almost falling. Fortunately, the maidservant beside her caught her in time. Little Yi-er stopped abruptly. When he looked up and saw Madame Shu's pale face, he immediately retreated. Before Madame Shu could recover from her shock, the maidservant beside her started scolding. You little bastard, what did your mother teach you? Don't you have eyes? If you hurt Madame Shu, can you afford to pay for it? Stop right there. There was a stone screen at the entrance of the courtyard, so Madame Shu couldn't see the people inside. However, the people inside could clearly hear the maidservant scolding. Seventh concubine hurried out, but little Chen Xiong stopped her and whispered, Esteemed Wang Fei is here. What are you afraid of? Little Chen Xiong had been here for so long, waiting for Madame Shu to come and settle the score. She didn't expect that Madame Shu would choose to come when esteemed Wang Fei was here. At this moment, Han Yunshi was standing behind the screen, not far from little Yi-er. Little Yi-er didn't refute. He glared angrily at the maidservant and retreated step by step. Madame Shu composed herself. When she saw little Yi-er's angry eyes, she immediately became angry. Han Yuni, don't you understand that I told you to stop? What's with that look? Do you think you're in the right after bumping into me? Is this how your mother taught you to treat your elders? You uncultured thing. Madame Shu had been with her son these days. Han Yuchi's butt was bleeding, so he could only lie down and not lie down. His temper was very irritable. Madame Shu accompanied him for a long time before he was willing to apply medicine and his mood stabilized. Once she was free, the first thing Madame Shu did was to visit seventh concubine. She knew that Han Yunshi had left her personal maidservant here, but so what if she was a personal maidservant? Not to mention a personal maidservant, even Han Yunshi couldn't meddle in the Han family's affairs. Last time, because of her son's rebuttal and offense, Han Yunshi had something on her, so Madame Shu had no choice but to restrain her arrogance and give in. But now, Han Yunshi didn't have anything on them. She wanted to see what right Han Yunshi, a married daughter, had to meddle in her mother's affairs. Today, she specially came to find trouble with seventh concubine. She was worried that she wouldn't be able to find any flaws in the seventh branch, but Han Yuni came knocking on her door. As Madame Shu spoke, she gave the maidservant a look, and the maidservant went forward to grab him. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Han Yunshi pulled Han Yuni aside and popped out from behind the screen. At this moment, it wasn't clear whether it was Han Yunshi who bumped into the maidservant or the maidservant who bumped into Han Yunshi. In any case, Han Yunshi retreated a few steps and accidentally lost her balance, falling down. "Aya!" she shouted. "Which uncultured thing dares to bump into this princess consort?" Madame Shu didn't expect Han Yunshi to be here as well. For a moment, she couldn't recover her senses and was dumbstruck. The maidservant's movements were still stiff. She also didn't know what had just happened. When she saw Han Yunshi sitting on the ground, her face turned pale and she was so frightened that she almost collapsed. This servant didn't do it on purpose. Whose maidservant is this? So rude and impetuous. "I think you did it on purpose." Han Yunshi angrily rebuked and deliberately ignored Madame Shu's existence. Hearing her shout, the maidservant's legs gave way and she fell to her knees. She was so frightened that she couldn't even speak clearly. This servant didn't. Madame Shu watched from the side. Han Yunshi didn't look at her, but she didn't want to see Han Yunshi even more. What was this little slut doing here again? A married daughter only ran back to her maternal home after being divorced. She really was shameless. Of course, all of this anger was hidden in Madame Shu's heart. After all, she was the daughter of a respectable family and had been in charge of the household for so many years. She still understood how things were done on the surface. "It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. I really didn't do it on purpose. Yunshi, when did you come? How come I didn't know?" Madame Shu said kindly as she hurried forward to help her up. But Han Yunshi suddenly stood up, her expression changing to a smile. "Then I think Ye didn't bump into you on purpose, did he, second madam?" Madame Shu gave a start before realizing Han Yunshi's intentions. Hearing the words second madam made her eyes turn cold, her delicate features turning malevolent. "That's right, how could it be on purpose? Servants don't know any better, so us masters naturally won't fuss over it." Madame Shu forced a smile. It had to be said that Madame Shu's words were quite formidable. If Han Yunshi continued to fuss over the matter, she'd become the servant she spoke of. Han Yunshi wasn't looking for trouble after eating her fill, but to save little Yi. Hearing Madame Shu's words, she dropped the matter. She glanced at Han Yuni out of the corner of her eye and smiled. "Second madam, you're here to find seventh madam, aren't you? I made a special trip to check on seventh young master's injuries. Seeing that he's alive and kicking, he should be fine, right? Then I don't have to worry," Madame Shu said lazily, a trace of ridicule on her lips. Fortunately, he was treated in time. Otherwise, who knows how badly he'd be injured? He might be bedridden for 10 days to half a month. Han Yunshi wasn't polite at all. It was Han Yuchi who'd be bedridden for 10 days to half a month, all right? Madame Shu suffered another setback. In a fit of anger, she couldn't help but remind her coldly, "Yunshi, ever since I married into the Han family, even your father has called me madam. The Han family doesn't have a second madam, only Madame Shu." "Is that so? Why didn't I know about this?" Esteemed Empress Dowager doesn't seem to know either. Before Han Yunshi could finish, Madame Shu heard the threat in her words and immediately defended herself. "Yunshi, I think you've misunderstood. I don't even have enough time to respect Big Sister, so why would I covet the position of official wife? What virtue or ability do I have? I don't dare compare myself to Big Sister. It's just a form of address. Your father doted on me back then, so he called me madam. This madam isn't the same madam. After all, it's your father's idea. It's not good for us to change it, is it?" Han Yunshi smiled and thought to herself, Madame Shu, Madame Shu. So you still know how to be afraid. Aya, it's just a form of address. This Wang Fei's used to calling you second madam, it's very intimate. Yunshi, actually this. Before Madame Shu could finish, Han Yunshi cut her off, imitating Madame Shu's cold tone. "Second madam, ever since I married into the Duke of Qin's estate, even my father calls me Qin Wang Fei. There's no Yunshi here, only esteemed Wang Fei. This." Chapter 92. Han Yunshi, that damned girl, actually used her own words to return the favor. Madame Shu was so angry that her chest felt stifled. The taste of blood immediately rose to her throat. If she hadn't held it in, she probably would have spat out a mouthful of blood. But this shameless slut, Did she really think she could use the Empress Dowager's name to strut around just because she saved the Crown Prince? She was too naive. Madame Shu's hands clenched into fists within her sleeves. Her long eyebrows reached her temples, and her eyes were fierce and fierce. She'd originally planned to wait until her son's injuries were better before asking Han Yunxi for the storehouse key as the eldest son. But now she couldn't care less. There was no time like the present. She wanted the storehouse key now and kill Han Yunxi's arrogant limelight. Esteemed Wang Fei is right. This commoner was lacking in manners. Madame Shu smiled insincerely and bowed slightly. It's fine. It'll be fine as long as you change. Han Yunxi was very confident and didn't feel guilty at all. If seventh young master doesn't have anything else, then I won't go in. Esteemed Wang Fei, you came just in time. I was just thinking of a day to pay you a visit. Why don't you come to this commoner's place for a cup of tea? Madame Shu added. At these words, Han Yunxi knew what was going on. Madame Shu wanted the storehouse key. Little Chen Xiong had been full of confidence in persuading 7th Madam these past few days. How would she know 7th Madam's worries? But Han Yunxi understood. She was a married daughter. Even if her status was noble, according to the customs of the world, she'd be gossiped about if she frequently returned to her maternal home, let alone meddling in her family's affairs. After all, Tianing country's customs could be considered civilized. In many places, once a daughter married out, she could only return to her maternal home after being divorced. Thus, if Madame Shu allied with a few other concubines to ask for the storehouse key in her hands, she really would have to give it to them. However, since Han Yunxi dared to come, she must have a countermeasure. She wasn't afraid. Is there something you can't talk about here? Han Yunxi feigned ignorance as she asked curiously. This matter can be big or small. Now that I'm the one in charge of the Han family, it's more appropriate to talk about it in my room. As Madame Shu spoke, she was about to leave when she turned around and glanced disdainfully at Han Yuni. She shouted towards the courtyard, 7th Madam, why don't you come along? 7th concubine's heart skipped a beat. She knew that something bad was about to happen, but she had no choice but to follow along. Before she left, she instructed Yi you and Sister Chen Xiong stay in the courtyard. Don't run around, understand? Han Yuni nodded obediently as he stole glances at Han Yunxi's retreating form. His dark eyes were filled with reluctance as if he'd never see this big sister of his ever again. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi had only taken a few steps when she suddenly turned around and said, Little Yi come here. Come with me. A child was a child. Han Yuni immediately broke into a grin, unable to hide his emotions. Just as he was about to run over, 7th concubine said, Esteemed Wang Fei, it's better for a child to. It's not a big deal, it's fine to let him come. I like him. Han Yunxi smiled and waved at Yi. A trace of worry flashed across 7th concubine's eyes. She wanted to say something but stopped. She originally wanted to wait for esteemed Wang Fei to come and talk to her about the storehouse key. Who knew that she would bump into Madame Shu the moment she arrived? Seeing that his mother didn't stop him, Yi was extremely excited and immediately ran over. However, this boy was still shy. He was clearly running towards Han Yunxi, but in the end, he grabbed his mother's hand. Han Yunxi was amused and picked up Yi. Why are you so afraid of me? I saved you, I won't eat you. Yi-er's little face reddened and he didn't speak. At the side, Madame Shu glanced at him and her lips curled into a mocking smile. No matter how much Han Yunxi dotes on this boy, he won't have a share of the storehouse key. Han Yunxi, just smile. I'm looking forward to your reaction later. Go, invite 3rd concubine over as well. Tell her that there's something important and she'll definitely come. Madame Shu instructed in a low voice. On the way, Han Yunxi kept teasing Yi. Although Yi was shy, he had a stubborn temper. No matter how Han Yunxi teased him, he didn't speak. Perhaps it was fate. Han Yunxi was exceptionally patient and didn't get angry. Hey, boy, do you know who I am? If you don't answer me, I'll punish you. Han Yunxi warned. Unfortunately, Han Yuni just looked at her and blinked his big, adorable eyes without answering. Han Yunxi thought for a moment and asked, Boy, Big sister plans to be your guardian and protect you. When you grow up, how do you plan to thank me? Unexpectedly, this time, Yi actually pursed his lips and timidly said, when I grow up, I'll protect you. Han Yunxi didn't expect this and laughed happily. You finally opened your mouth. Okay, big sister will remember. Here, pinky swear. As she spoke, she stretched out her pinky. Yi blushed and smiled, stretching out his pinky as well. Holding Yi's pinky, Han Yunxi's heart was actually a little heavy. Little Yi, you have to grow up smoothly. Other than Madame Tianxin's orchid residence, Madame Shu's fallen secluded residence was the largest and had the best location in the residence. Originally, this courtyard was worthy of its name, quiet and livable. Unfortunately, after eldest young master Han Yuchi's renovations, it completely lost its original elegance and became luxurious and high-profile. Those who didn't know would think that they came to the wrong place. Along the way, Madame Shu was looking forward to Han Yunxi's reaction when she asked for the storehouse key. She had thought of all sorts of reasons. This time, if Han Yunxi didn't hand over the storehouse key, it wouldn't be so easy for her to leave the Han residence. But who knew that when the group of people arrived at fallen secluded residence, they saw second young Miss Han Ruoshua running out in a sorry state. No matter how they looked at it, it looked like she was running away. What was going on? Han Ruoshua turned around and saw Han Yunxi and the others. She was first stunned, then choked with sobs. Madame Shu, eldest young master, is too much of a bully. What happened? Madame Shu asked with a frown. Unexpectedly, before Han Ruoshua could complain, she heard a commotion from inside the door. Then, she saw a group of servants swarming out of the door like a swarm of bees. Many people were even pushed to the ground and rolled a few times. Madam, eldest young master is angry again. Not only did he chase everyone out, he also smashed a lot of things and almost hurt second young miss. Madam, eldest young master also smashed all of the medicine. Even the ointment you applied this morning was all gone. I couldn't persuade him no matter what. Hearing the servant's report, Madame Shu's face instantly darkened. Wasn't he fine when she left? How could this unfilial son change his face so quickly? Wasn't it shameful to make such a scene in front of Han Yunxi and 7th Madam? The servant still wanted to speak, but Madame Shu coldly cut him off. Enough, you useless things. None of you can serve a good person. No wonder eldest young master chased you out. Get the hell out of here. The servants didn't dare to speak. They all admitted that they were unlucky and retreated. Madame Shu, you invited me and my mother here. What does eldest young master mean by this? Isn't he going too far? Han Ruoshua said angrily. Third Madame Li's background wasn't as good as Madame Shu's, but she was still from a large family. Her maternal family in Tianshui City in the north of Tianing was considered a decent family. Although Madame Li was the daughter of a concubine, her dowry when she married into the family was not small. Moreover, she had always been generous and magnanimous, so she didn't have much direct conflict with Madame Shu. Madame Shu and Madame Li minded their own business and tolerated each other's children. Ruoshua, where's your mother? Is she still inside? Madame Shu pretended to be concerned. My mother told me to come over first. She'll be right behind me. Fortunately, she didn't come with me. Otherwise, I can guarantee that eldest young master would even dare to hurt my mother. Han Ruoshua usually disliked Han Yuchi the most, so she had to seize this chance to complain. Aya, it's his fault. Just take into account that his injuries are so serious and don't bicker with him, Madame Shu comforted. Madame Shu, don't worry. I'm not that petty, Han Ruoshua said. As Han Ruoshua spoke, she pretended to look up carelessly and saw Han Yunxi and the rest. Yunxi, isn't this big sis Yunxi? Han Ruoshua cried out in pleasant surprise. She pretended to grumble as she glared at 7th Madam and stomped her foot. Her acting was very real. 7th Madam, when did big sis Yunxi come? You didn't even tell me. Han Yunxi put on a false smile as she thought to herself, what a smooth and slick second young miss. She's on good terms with all the other branches, so why didn't she get along with me back then? After being an older sister for so many years, This was the first time she'd heard her call her big sis Yunshi. When she, the eldest daughter of the first wife, lost power, Han Ruoshue, as the second young miss, was the boss of the sisters. She'd secretly instigated the other younger sisters to make things difficult for her. Don't think I don't know just because you're hiding behind the scenes. Han Ruoshue carefully examined Han Yunshi's face, excitement written all over her face. Big sis Yunshi, your face is really healed. It's so beautiful, so I. But before she could finish, Han Yunshi cut her off cold. Second young miss, this Wang Fei isn't familiar with you, is she? Ugh. Han Ruoshue's expression immediately turned stiff, but she quickly recovered. Big sis Yunshi just loves to joke. Unfortunately, Han Yunshi wasn't planning to give her any face. Cold again, she said, this Wang Fei isn't joking. At these words, the atmosphere turned chilly. Han Ruoshue's eyes flashed with hatred as she thought to herself, Han Yunshi, this shameless thing. She caused father to go to prison, stole the storehouse key, and now she dares to come strutting around at the Han estate. Does she think no one knows about her scandalous deeds? She'd endure it. She'd wait and see how Lady Shu would take back the storehouse key and deal with her. Lady Shu must have called everyone here for the sake of the storehouse key. Thinking up to here, Han Ruoshue suppressed her anger and smiled faintly. She purposely gave Han Yunshi a grand bow. This commoner girl Han Ruoshue greets esteemed Wang Fei. Long live esteemed Wang Fei. Han Yunshi was too lazy to spare her a glance. Cold, she said, dispense with the formalities. At this moment, an angry roar came from the courtyard. Where's that shameless slut? Does she still dare to come? This young master sees her as a thief. She stole my family's things and still dares to come strutting around. This young master would like to see how long that slut can keep up her arrogance. If you know what's good for you, then hurry up and return the thing. Otherwise, this young master will definitely make her regret it. These curses didn't mention any names, but they all hinted at Han Yunshi. It was obvious that the young master inside knew Han Yunshi had come and was cursing Han Yunshi for taking the storehouse key. Han Yunshi narrowed her eyes. Of course she wouldn't be so stupid as to argue with Han Yunshi in such a provocation. She'd confess without being pressed and treat herself as a thief. If Han Yunshi wanted the storehouse key, he could forget about it in his next life. Chapter 93. Madame Shu was originally embarrassed, but when she heard her son's words, she was overjoyed. Her son had finally improved. She looked at Han Yunshi with a cold smile, waiting for Han Yunshi to refute. Han Ruoshue was also caught off guard and gloated. Aya, Madame Shu, who is young master scolding? What a terrible name. He's scolding the person who deserves to be scolded. Whoever is cheap or a thief, that's who. Madame Shu chuckled, wishing for someone to chime in with her. Is that so? Ha. Thieves deserve to be scolded. They're worse than the rats in the saws. Shameless. Han Ruoshue agreed. Exactly. Too bad there are a lot of people like that these days. Madame Shu and Han Ruoshue took the opportunity to mock Han Yunshi. They thought that Han Yunshi would flip out, but she was unmoved. Seeing this, the two felt as if their fists had punched cotton. They couldn't muster up any strength and felt suffocated. Han Ruoshue was not satisfied and was about to speak when Han Yunshi said, "Second madam, did you invite everyone here to stand here and listen to young master's scolding?" As she spoke, she put Ye down and handed him to seventh madam. She continued, "How can the young master of the Han family be like this? What's the difference between him and a shrew?" Madame Shu was about to answer when suddenly, a water bottle was thrown from inside. "Scram, bitch. All of you, scram." Madame Shu's smug expression changed abruptly. "What's wrong with you, Chi? Is there something wrong with his brain? Why is he scolding everyone?" Han Yunshi glanced at the broken pieces of the vase and smiled lightly. Her lips curled into a mocking smile, but she didn't say anything. However, that mocking smile was like a needle stabbing into Madame Shu's heart. Madame Shu felt embarrassed. She didn't know what her son would do to make everyone wait here. It was obviously inappropriate, and Han Yunshi wouldn't be happy either. "Let everyone go in together." Heavens knew what kind of state Yuqi, that brat, had turned the room upside down. When the time came, wouldn't Han Yunqi laugh at them? Madame Shu pondered for a moment, wondering if she should go to the hall in the front yard. At this time, Han Ruoxue said, "Madame Shu, why don't we not go in? Young master needs peace and quiet to recuperate. My mother hasn't come over yet. Why don't we go to my mother's courtyard? It's very close to here, just a few steps away." Han Ruoxue didn't want to miss such a great opportunity. She couldn't wait to see Madame Shu make things difficult for Han Yunqi about the storeroom key. Madame Shu was naturally happy that Han Ruoxue had given her a way out. She nodded repeatedly. That's good, that's good. Esteemed Princess Consort, please come with me. My mother has some good spring tea." Han Ruoxue was in a very good mood. Spring tea? Han Yunqi was bewildered. It was still winter in Tianning country right now. There was still a month until the New Year's festival, so where would the spring tea come from? Let's go. No matter how far it is to drink spring tea in the dead of winter, this Wang Fei still has to go, she said with a faint smile. Third Madam might be a northerner, but she's an old tea addict. I think this spring tea must have been bought from the southern borders at a high price, right? Madame Shu smiled as well. So they came from the southern borders. It should be spring there right now. Han Ruoxue never avoided talking about things that would give her face. Along the way, she showed off many things related to tea leaves. Han Yunqi listened in silence. In the past, she really didn't know that Third Madam and Han Ruoxue were so knowledgeable about tea. As expected, Third Madam's sunset court was very close to Madame Shu's courtyard. They arrived after passing through a patch of grass. When Han Yunqi and the others arrived, Madame Li was just about to leave the house. As soon as she saw them, Madame Li hurried forward and curtsied to Han Yunqi. This commoner, Madame Li, greets esteemed Princess Consort. 10,000 blessings to esteemed Princess Consort. It had to be said that Madame Li gave Han Yunqi a better impression than Seventh Madam. Seventh Madam was too humble and timid, while Madame Li was neither servile nor overbearing. It made people feel very comfortable. Han Yunqi didn't have a deep impression of Madame Li. In her memory, this Third Madam had never had any conflicts with any branch. No one dared to provoke her, and she wouldn't take the initiative to provoke others. When she appeared in large events, she was always gracious and appropriate. She wouldn't be ignored or attract too much attention. Han Yunqi thought that if Han Ruoxue was a man, perhaps Han Konggan would consider giving the position of the head of the household to the third branch. Although Han Ruoxue could take in a son-in-law, it wasn't something to be proud of. Moreover, it wasn't as if the Han family didn't have a male heir. You may rise. Han Yunqi waved her hand, indicating for Third Madam to rise. When Third Madam got up, she didn't forget to greet Madame Shu and Seventh Madam. Her attitude was polite and well-mannered. She even smiled at little Yi Er. Han Yunqi saw this but didn't say anything. Madame Shu explained the purpose of her visit, and Third Madam invited everyone into the courtyard. As soon as they entered the courtyard, the fragrance of tea immediately assailed their nostrils. It was said that the tea in Third Madam's room never ran out. Everyone took a seat. Third Madam personally fetched a pot of spring tea and said with a smile, "I only received this tea a few days ago. I was just thinking of giving some to everyone to try. Coincidentally, everyone is here today. Madame Shu, no matter what business you have, since you're here, let's try this tea first." Of course, Madame Shu agreed. However, she was absent-minded and gulped down several cups of tea. Seventh Madam didn't know much about tea and wasn't in the mood. Her worry was written all over her face. She wanted to remind Han Yunqi several times but didn't know how to. On the other hand, Han Yunqi wasn't in a hurry. She tasted it with relish. Needless to say, this spring tea was much more delicious than the tea she used for her experiment. The tea the servant gave her was autumn tea. Although it was well preserved, it had been a long time. The color and fragrance were much worse. As Han Yunqi drank, she pondered. Spring tea and autumn tea from the same tea tree tasted completely different. Presumably, the ingredients in the tea leaves were also much different. Should she use the spring tea to test it? She hesitated for a moment before asking, "Third Madam, why is this spring tea more delicious than autumn tea?" Third Madam smiled and said, "The true meaning of spring tea isn't the tea leaves produced in the spring. It's the tea leaves picked from the first budding leaves of the tea tree after the winter. The flesh of spring tea leaves is thick and the tea leaves contain aromatic substances as well as various other substances. Therefore, compared to summer tea and autumn tea, the taste is more fresh and the fragrance is more pleasant." As soon as she said this, Han Yunshi became alert. Aromatic substances and other substances? What was Third Madam referring to? Could it be that she was referring to the various trace elements in the tea leaves? One had to know that these things were only studied so meticulously in the modern era. In ancient times, even traditional Chinese medicine was very rough on the ingredients of medicine. It was rare for a unit of measurement as small as money to appear on the medicine list. She didn't expect Third Madam to study it so meticulously. Was it the tea fanatics of this era who studied it so meticulously, or was Third Madam especially knowledgeable? Han Yunshi was shocked in her heart, but she didn't show it. She continued to ask, "So, in terms of preservation, spring tea is also different from other teas?" Third Madam seemed to have sensed something. A trace of wariness flashed through her eyes as she smiled. "True spring tea is rare. Most of it can be finished within a month, so it's not so particular about preservation." Han Yunshi asked a few more probing questions. Third Madam's expression didn't change. She continued to smile and was very patient. However, the answers that came out were things that Han Yunshi already knew. There was nothing new. After a few cups of tea, Lady Shu finally couldn't take it anymore. She gave Third Madam a look, telling her to stop talking. Third Madam closed her mouth and changed the tea leaves to brew again. Lady Shu was very satisfied. She put down the teacup and sighed with emotion. "Esteemed Wang Fei, after Master went to prison, many things happened in this family. A few of the concubines ran away with a lot of money. Now, only us three sisters are left." Sigh. As Lady Shu spoke, she deliberately looked at Madam Li and then at Seventh Madam. She continued, "Master was sentenced to life in prison. He doesn't even allow visitors. Now, the Han family is such a big family, but there's no one to call the shots. How many people in the family are jealous? Yesterday, Third Uncle even came to ask me. He said that if the young masters in the family can't get up, I should quickly hand over the storehouse key to him. He said that the storehouse key and the Han family medical cannon belong to the Han family, not our family. Tell me, isn't that infuriating?" As soon as she finished speaking, there was silence. Everyone knew that the storehouse key was in Han Yunshi's hands. Seventh Madam lowered her head and didn't dare to make a sound. Third Madam was busy brewing tea and didn't make a sound. Smart people could tell that Lady Shu's words were beautiful. She didn't point the finger at Han Yunshi, but she was obviously insinuating that Han Yunshi was the least qualified to have the storehouse key. Han Yunshi didn't speak either. She hugged Yi with one hand and poured tea with the other. She was calm and composed. This spring tea was fresh but not greasy. It tasted so good that she was falling in love with it. Among those present, Yi's expression was the most serious. His dark eyes were focused, as if he was trying hard to figure out the meaning behind Lady Shu's words. Seeing that no one reacted, Madame Shu didn't panic. She didn't expect seventh concubine and third concubine to speak up for her today. She only needed them to be present so that they wouldn't deny it if the storehouse key fell into her hands. Lady Shu sighed softly and said, "Yesterday, Third Uncle came. This morning, Fourth Uncle came as well. His intentions were similar to Third Uncle's. Don't you think they're bullying our Han family because we don't have enough people?" Although no one answered, Lady Shu continued, "No matter what, our Yuchi is an adult. He's a dignified young master. How can they be like this?" At this moment, Han Ruoshua, who had been sitting by Third Madam's side, couldn't help but ask, "Lady Shu, my father's been in prison for a while now. Why did they only come knocking now?" At these words, Third Madam immediately stomped on Han Ruoshua's foot under the table. Han Ruoshua cried out in pain, but had no choice but to endure it. Lady Shu rejoiced at the response and sighed. I don't know where they heard the news. They said the storehouse key is with esteemed Wang Fei because none of our young masters can support themselves. They had to rely on esteemed Wang Fei's power and influence to keep the key with her. At this, Lady Shu finally met Han Yunxi's eyes. Esteemed Wang Fei, say, if news of this spreads, it doesn't matter if it loses the Han family's face, but it'll affect you negatively as well. If Grand Concubine Yi finds out, she'll definitely be unhappy. If Grand Concubine Yi knew, of course she'd be unhappy. Although the Han family was large and prosperous, it wasn't even the tip of the iceberg compared to the Duke of Qin's estate. Why would Grand Concubine Yi care about the Han family's small assets? Once news of this spread, the fact that Qin Wangfei had returned to her maternal family to fight for the family assets was enough to put Han Yunxi on the capital's headlines again. In the end, she'd be shaming the Duke of Qin's estate. Chapter 94. Qin Wangfei's incomparably glorious title also brought Han Yunxi various restrictions. Han Yunxi understood this principle very early on. Although Madame Shu's threat was very effective, it was a pity that it was no longer new to her. However, since Madame Shu wanted to play, she didn't mind playing with her to the end. She smiled and said, "Second Madam, the Han family is in such a mess, but you still care about my imperial mother's feelings. This princess consort will definitely convey your concern to imperial mother." When these words came out, Madame Shu couldn't remain calm. What did Han Yunxi mean? Could it be that she wasn't afraid? She even called her imperial mother so affectionately. Han Yunxi was calm and composed as she spoke again. "Since my uncles are so concerned about the storehouse key and the Han family's successors, I'd like to ask Second Madam to tell them when they come back next time. Just say that my father's only been imprisoned, not dead. He knows the choice of the family head in his heart. There's no need for some people who have nothing better to do and have ulterior motives to worry about it." Madame Shu's words were insinuating Han Yunxi, and now Han Yunxi was making oblique accusations. This time, how could Madame Shu sit still? She didn't think that Han Yunxi would dare to mention Han Konggan. She received news from the Ministry of Personnel that Han Yunxi saved the Crown Prince and denied Han Konggan's diagnosis. This was the real reason why Han Konggan was in prison. To put it bluntly, it was Han Yunxi who harmed Han Konggan. Now she was restricting the Han family from visiting Han Konggan. This was clearly because she stole the storehouse key and was afraid that the matter would be exposed. This shameless brat actually dared to talk about her father so confidently. Madame Shu couldn't help but grit her teeth. Since this matter was brought up today, she wouldn't let it go so easily. Esteemed Princess Consort's words are reasonable. However, in this commoner's opinion, esteemed Princess Consort is a married woman after all. If the Han family's storehouse key is in your hands, it will inevitably cause gossip. Madame Shu paused for a moment before continuing. "I'm sure old master entrusted the storehouse key to you in a moment of desperation and asked you to pass it to the Han family, right?" Han Yunxi didn't say anything. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Madame Shu playfully. For a moment, the surroundings suddenly became quiet and the atmosphere became tense. Madame Shu was obviously in the right, but for some reason, she felt guilty when Han Yunxi sized her up. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Madame Li, Madame Helian, you two should also say something. Right now, there are only us three sisters left in the estate. It's time for us to work together. The Han family cannot be defeated by our hands." Helian She didn't even dare to raise her head, let alone answer. Li She remained silent, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. She acted as the host and poured tea for everyone present. The scene fell into silence once again. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a rustling sound came from outside. "Are you guys discussing the storehouse key? This young master is the eldest son of the Han clan. Shouldn't you all respect this young master's opinion? Where's the key? Take it out now." She first heard the sound, then saw the person. The eldest young master was very agitated. He supported himself with a walking stick with one hand and covered his butt with the other. He limped over to stand at the door and looked at Han Yunxi coldly. He must have just found out that Madame Shu wanted the storehouse key. Otherwise, he would have rushed out of Luo Yu residence long ago. Previously, Han Yuqi had scolded her so harshly, but Han Yunqi had already let it go. She didn't expect that he would actually come here. Han Yunqi didn't have that much patience. Coldly, she said, "The storehouse key is in this princess's hands. What are you muttering about?" When these words came out, Han Yuqi became even more agitated. He wanted to take a big step forward, but who knew that he would accidentally fall forward and fall flat on his face. Bang! It was especially heavy. Ouch! The eldest young master cried out in pain. He couldn't raise his head. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. Little Yi was the first to laugh. Then, Han Yunqi laughed. "Ha ha, eldest young master, there's no poop on the floor. Why are you lying there? Son." Madame Shu shouted and rushed over. "Son, are you all right?" Madame Shu struggled to support him. With great difficulty, she made Han Yuqi raise his head. She saw that his forehead, cheeks, and the tip of his nose were all bruised and red. It was as comical as it could be. Seeing this, the entire hall roared with laughter. Even the cautious seventh madam couldn't help but laugh. At this time, Madame Shu was helping Han Yuqi turn over. Who knew that when he turned over, his butt hit the ground? Han Yuqi suddenly shouted, "It hurts, it hurts." As if he had been electrocuted, he suddenly lay on his side. His butt left the ground, and then he pushed Madame Shu away. He was so fierce that it was terrifying. "Do you want to hurt me to death?" Madame Shu saw that his face was twisted in pain. Her heart ached and she was very concerned. "Mother didn't do it on purpose. Are you all right? Does it still hurt? Let's go back. Mother will apply medicine for you." However, Han Yuqi turned his head and glared at the people around him. He said fiercely, "What are you laughing at? Is it very funny?" This time, other than Han Yunqi, everyone stopped laughing. Especially seventh madam. She immediately gave little Yi a look. Little Yi could only purse his lips and bear it. "It's very funny. Ha ha ha, I laughed until my stomach hurts. Eldest young master, why are you so weak? It's only been a few hits and you're injured so badly." Han Yunqi was amused. "You." Han Yuqi was almost angered to death. He suddenly made a big move, but Madame Shu hurriedly held him down. "Slow down, slow down." With this reminder, Han Yuqi finally calmed down. With one hand covering his butt and the other holding Madame Shu's hand, he carefully stood up. He was tall and strong, and with his fat body, his careful movements were especially comical. In short, Han Yunqi couldn't stop laughing until her stomach hurt. Little Yi was by Han Yunqi's side. He had been holding back for a long time. Seeing Han Yunqi laughing like this, he finally couldn't hold it in and let out a fut. At this time, Han Yuqi, who had just steadied himself, immediately looked over coldly and angrily said, "Han Yuni, you dare to laugh at this young master?" He couldn't do anything to Han Yunqi, but he could at least scold Han Yuni. "At such a young age, you dare to laugh at your elder brother. You uneducated thing." Little Yi immediately quieted down. Seventh madam lowered her head and didn't dare to make a sound. Scolding a son for being uneducated in front of his mother was undoubtedly a kind of insult. A cold glint flashed through Han Yunqi's eyes. She hugged little Yi and sneered, "Yi laugh if you want to. He's already an adult, yet he dares to speak rudely in front of his elders. Is he worthy of being educated? Also, he can't even walk properly. From what I see, not only did his mother not teach him how to behave, she didn't even teach him how to walk. It's really too funny. If it were me, I would hide if I was afraid of being laughed at. What are you mumbling about?" As Han Yunqi spoke, she deliberately laughed ha 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 3 times. She teased little Yi-er's little face. "Come, give sister a smile." With big sister's protection, little Yi-er wasn't afraid of anything. He slowly cracked open his mouth and gave Han Yunqi an especially beautiful smile. "That's right. Smile and you'll be in a good mood." Madame Shu was so angry that her face turned purple. Han Yuqi was clumsy and couldn't refute her. His anger surged and he immediately shouted, "Qin Wangfei, don't talk nonsense. Hand over the storehouse key now. That belongs to the Han family." Since you're already married, it has nothing to do with you. Hand it over immediately. In the end, they were all here for the storehouse key. Han Yunxi was calm and composed as she lifted her chin high. I didn't bring it. You. Han Yuchi clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he said in a low voice, Slut, you're asking for a beating. Madame Shu had long wanted to hit her, but after experiencing many storms, she was still calm. She pressed down on Han Yuchi's hand and said in a low voice, Didn't you suffer enough last time? Why are you so impulsive? See how I deal with her. Han Yuchi's heart still palpitated at the mention of the 50 paddles. He gritted his teeth and could only endure for now. Anyway, when he got the storehouse key first, he would slowly torture Han Yunxi. She doted on Han Yuni, right? When the time came, he would definitely serve that brat well. Madame Shu took a deep breath and supported her son as they walked over. Han Yuchi couldn't sit and could only stand at the side. Seeing this, Madame Li finally spoke up, Someone, come and help eldest young master. 2 page boys hurriedly ran over and supported Han Yuchi on both sides. At this time, Madame Shu was relieved and sat back down. She was still thinking about the question just now. Qin Wangfei, presumably, old master entrusted the storehouse key to you in a moment of desperation and asked you to hand it over to the Han family, right? Madame Shu asked again. Today, she had to force Han Yunxi to answer this question no matter what. However, Han Yunxi still remained silent. To Han Yuchi, the storehouse key was simply a curse. Seeing Han Yunxi's silence, he immediately questioned, Qin Wangfei, answer. Don't tell me you're guilty. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi still remained silent. Seeing this, Han Yuchi was even more certain that Han Yunxi must have snatched the storehouse key from his father. He was about to make trouble when Madame Li, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened her mouth. I think that old master must have given instructions for the storehouse key to be in Wangfei's hands, right? A cold smile flashed through Han Yunxi's eyes. She was silent because she was waiting for third madam to speak. Previously, she thought that Madame Shu's words were quite impressive, but after hearing Madame Li's words, she realized that the true expert was Madame Li. Madame Li's words were clearly probing. If Han Konggan had taken the initiative to give the storehouse key to her, then he must have instructed her to give it to someone else. At this time, she should have said it. If she had snatched the storehouse key from Han Konggan's hands, then it would be difficult for her to answer this kind of question. Madame Li was indeed smart. According to common sense, when Han Konggan handed the house key to Han Yunxi, he would have instructed her to give it to the Han family. Unfortunately, Madame Li overestimated the Han family's situation and underestimated Han Konggan. Han Konggan might have been muddle-headed on the matter of Madame Tianxin, but he was shrewd in other matters. He was very clear on the conduct of the young masters and the thoughts of the concubines. In his heart, he was not biased. Everything was for the sake of the Han family. Even though he had specifically instructed Han Yuni, he did not say that Han Yuni would inherit the position of the house head. He had given the choice to Han Yunxi. Compared to the power of the Ministry of Personnel behind Madame Shu, Han Konggan was more willing to believe in Han Yunxi. Hearing Madame Li's words, Madame Shu was overjoyed and hurriedly added, That's right, old master must have instructed you to do something. Wangfei, look at the situation now. Everyone is here today, so just say it. Han Yunxi sneered in her heart. She had originally planned to investigate the matter of the spy in the general's estate before dealing with the Han family's matter. Now, since Madame Shu was so anxious and Madame Li could not hold back, there was no harm in saying it in advance. Chapter 95. Han Yunxi leisurely drank a cup of tea before opening her mouth. Father did tell me something. When she said this, even seventh madam, who had her head lowered, looked up. Her brows were tightly knit, looking very worried. Madame Li was very calm, but Han Ruoxue and Madame Shu were both very nervous. Of course, the most nervous person was Han Yuchi. He couldn't wait to blurt out, What is it? Something big. Han Yunxi's tone became heavy, which made Han Yuchi even more nervous. He forgot to investigate the truth and unconsciously leaned forward, anxiously asking, What big thing? Father said that the storehouse key will be temporarily given to me for safekeeping. When there's a suitable candidate for the head of the household, I'll hand over the key. During this time, he hopes that the young masters and misses of each branch will concentrate on studying medicine and won't have too many utilitarian thoughts. When she said this, Han Yuchi's eyes turned cold and he angrily said, "Impossible. You're lying." He knew that Han Yunchi would definitely find an excuse like this. But if he wanted to fool everyone present, he was too naive. How could Father do this? Not to mention that Father went to prison because of her. Even before he went to prison, the person Father disliked the most was this young miss. Even if Father didn't have any intention of appointing another head of the household, he couldn't possibly entrust the storehouse key to Han Yunchi. Who did she think she was? Esteemed Wang Fei, it's not appropriate to say these words without evidence. Madame Shu's voice also turned cold. On the side, Han Ruoxue also couldn't help it. Han Yunchi's words were simply a joke to her. Esteemed Wang Fei, this kind of joke isn't funny at all. How about you go to the Supreme Court and let everyone see Father? Otherwise, even if we believe you, the people in the clan won't believe you. Han Ruoxue's words were very direct. This time, Madame Li didn't stop her. Han Yuchi quickly agreed, "That's right. Qin Wang Fei, if you have the ability, then go to the Supreme Court and make an exception and let us see Father. Otherwise, we definitely won't believe you." "That's right, Princess Consort. I've heard that life imprisonment isn't that strict. You're allowed to visit once or twice a year. I can't do that. Many people can't see Old Master. Maybe there's someone from above. If you can make an exception, it shouldn't be a problem, right?" Madame Shu couldn't wait to ask. "Esteemed Wang Fei, of course we believe you. However, this is a big matter after all. You just said that Master is only in prison. He's still here. In my opinion, it's more appropriate to let the young Masters and young Misses meet with the Old Master. That way, you won't be the subject of gossip." Madame Li's words were always so beautiful. Han Yunchi nodded. Very good. The second branch and the third branch were finally on the same side. Everyone was waiting for Han Yunchi to speak. They thought that she would refuse due to her guilty conscience, but who would have thought that Han Yunchi would actually nod her head? "All right, then this princess will immediately handle this matter when I return and arrange for my husband to meet with you as soon as possible." She said it so casually, as if she was saying that the weather was good. For a moment, everyone present was stunned and revealed an incredulous expression. Even the silent seventh madam was shocked. They didn't hear wrongly, right? Han Yunchi had forbidden them from visiting because she didn't understand the Han family's situation or Han Yuni. She was afraid that if the Han family met with Han Konggan and talked too much, it'd affect how she supported the head of the Han family. Now, it was proven that she and little Yi hit it off the best. She had long decided on a candidate. At this time, she wasn't afraid of the Han family meeting Han Konggan. She couldn't wait for them to meet him so that they wouldn't cause her trouble in the future. Today, she came to the Han family to see little Yi and relax. She didn't expect Madame Shu to be so impatient to ask her for the storeroom key. That's good too. I'll settle this matter as soon as possible and focus on the general's estate. Han Yunchi finished the tea in her cup, put down little Yi and stood up lazily. Since the matter was settled, she should go back. Unexpectedly, just as she stood up, a northwest wind blew and the detoxification system suddenly issued an alarm. Beep, beep, beep. There's poison. The detoxification system's sudden warning surprised Han Yunchi and she froze. However, after a moment, the wind stopped and the detoxification system's alarm was immediately removed. Based on the frequency of the detoxification system's warning, the poison was very close to her. However, she had been sitting here for so long. Why did the detoxification system only warn her now? Why did the wind only warn her now? Without a doubt, the northwest wind had blown the poison over. The wind had a poisonous smell. Generally speaking, only extremely toxic poisons would be blown by the wind and their smell would remain in the wind. The smell would disappear very quickly in the wind. If it could be detected, it meant that the source of the poison wasn't far from her. Thinking of this, Han Yunshi abruptly turned to look at the northwest corner of the courtyard. There was a small wooden hut in the northwest corner of the courtyard. There were no windows and the door was locked from the outside. Could it be there? However, it wasn't too far away and didn't exceed the detection range of the detoxification system. Could it be that the amount of poison there was so little that the wind had to carry the smell of the poison over in order to detect it? Han Yunshi's curiosity was completely aroused. How could there be poison in Third Madam's courtyard? Since it was stored in the wooden hut, why was there so little poison? What kind of poison was stored in there? She subconsciously wanted to walk over. Unexpectedly, Third Madam suddenly stood up and called out, "Esteemed Princess Consort, what are you looking at?" Han Yunshi finally regained her senses. She hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. She smiled and said, "Nothing." Although it was nothing, she still walked over with large strides. Third Madam's eyes flashed with vigilance, but she didn't stop her. Han Yunshi arrived in front of the wooden hut and officially activated the detoxification system scan. This scan was incredible. Heavens! It was actually snake venom. Han Yunshi's heartbeat sped up. The detoxification system further analyzed and quickly identified 3 snake venoms. Although they weren't the 3 rarest snake venoms in the 10,000 snake venom formula, they were 3 of the other 7 snake venoms. Han Yunshi's heartbeat couldn't help but speed up. It was impossible to say that she didn't have any suspicions. She never thought that she would find snake venom here. How could it be so coincidental? What else was hidden in this wooden hut? Based on the amount of poison that was detected, it was very little. It was highly likely that it was residual poison powder. If she didn't have the detoxification system, even if she went in to investigate, she might not be able to detect it. With this amount, if it was hidden in a person's body or in water, it might not be detected and it might not be life-threatening. However, if it was placed in the form of poison powder, it still couldn't escape the detoxification system's fiery eyes of truth. Han Yunshi wasn't willing to give up and checked again. However, other than the 3 snake venoms, there was nothing else. Everyone was puzzled when they saw her standing motionless at the door. Third Concubine's hands, which were hidden in her sleeves, gradually clenched into fists. That place was where she usually concocted poisons. However, she had instructed the servants to dispose of all the poisons a few days ago and tidy up all the medicine cabinets. Why would Han Yunshi be suspicious of this place? Han Yunshi had cured the young general's poison and confirmed that it was a slow-acting poison. The general's estate would definitely ferret out the culprit who'd poisoned him. Could it be that Han Yunshi was helping them find the culprit as well? Even if that was the case, Han Yunshi, that damned girl, knew how to detoxify poisons. Could it be that she also knew how to detect poisons? Taking a step back, even if she knew how to detect poisons, even if there was poison in the hut, she had no reason to suspect her for no reason. She had no reason to be interested in this wooden hut. Thinking of this, Third Concubine clenched her fists. She thought that she must be overthinking things. Han Yunshi was just purely interested in this wooden hut. She had always been very calm and couldn't lose her composure. "Esteemed Wang Fei, what are you doing?" Han Ruoxue asked. This little hut was where her mother usually learned how to concoct medicine. It was really strange. Why was Han Yunshi suddenly interested in this hut? Han Yunshi finally turned her head and looked over. Her gaze inadvertently swept over Third Concubine, but it didn't linger. She smiled faintly and said, "I see that this wooden hut is exquisitely built. I quite like it." When these words came out, Third Concubine's heart finally relaxed. She knew that she was overthinking things. Han Ruoxue was about to speak when Third Concubine beat her to it. "Esteemed Wang Fei, this hut is my pharmacy. It was built a few years ago." So it was a pharmacy. The Han family was a medical family. Their children all had to learn medicine. The concubines who married into the Han family more or less also had to learn medicine. Most of them studied pharmacology, identifying medicine, and concocting medicine. As Third Concubine spoke, she walked over. "Since esteemed Wang Fei likes it, why don't you go in and take a look? Master saw my hut before and also liked it very much." Han Yunshi was suspicious of third concubine. Who knew that third concubine would be so calm? It was really interesting. A complicated look flashed across her eyes. She smiled. Then let's go in and take a look. As soon as the small wooden hut opened, the smell of medicinal herbs rushed out. The space inside wasn't big. There were 2 rows of medicine cabinets on the left and right. In the middle was a long square table and a stove for boiling medicine. Everything was neatly arranged and very clean. Han Yunshi walked in and casually opened a few drawers. She found that there really were medicinal herbs inside. She walked slowly and quietly activated the detoxification system to slowly search for the specific location of the 3 snake poisons. The small wooden hut was too small. Everyone else was watching from the door. Only third concubine personally followed in. She walked behind Han Yunshi. Her steps were slow and composed. However, not long after, Han Yunshi stopped and gently pressed on a drawer in front of her. Seeing this, third concubine's heart suddenly jumped. She remembered very clearly that this drawer stored a type of snake poison. As Han Yunshi slowly pulled open the drawer, third concubine's heartbeat sped up again. Of course, there was no snake poison in the drawer. There were other medicinal herbs. However, she didn't know why, but she felt guilty for no reason. Medicinal herbs. Han Yunshi's heart jumped. She had clearly checked the snake poison. How could it be medicinal herbs? Without a doubt, the original snake poison here had been replaced. Moreover, it should have been done not long ago. That was why such a small amount of poison could still be detected. Han Yunshi originally wanted to ask, but after hesitating for a moment, she decided not to ask. She continued to walk forward and quickly locked onto another drawer. At this time, third concubine's heart jumped again. This drawer had also stored snake poison. Han Yunshi opened it and saw that it was still medicinal herbs. However, the detoxification system reminded her that there was a small amount of poison left. It was a highly toxic snake poison. Had it been replaced again? Such a coincidence. Han Yunshi was suspicious and inadvertently turned to look at third concubine. Third concubine didn't expect her to turn around. She was caught off guard and revealed a panicked expression. Wang Fei, what's wrong? Chapter 96. Seeing Madame Li's flustered expression, Han Yunshi felt a bit suspicious. She didn't know if it was because she had turned around too quickly and scared Madame Li, or if Madame Li had a guilty conscience. It's fine. You have quite a lot of medicinal ingredients here. Han Yunshi smiled and continued walking forward. When Han Yunshi turned around, third madam finally let out a sigh of relief. She didn't miss Han Yunshi opening the 2 snake poison drawers. She was clearly much slower than before. Someone who could cure the 10,000 snake poison must know the recipe for the 10,000 snake poison. Could it be that Han Yunshi suspected something? No. All of the poison had been cleaned out. Even if Han Yunshi opened all of the drawers here, she wouldn't find anything. Even if Han Yunshi really suspected her, she could only deny this suspicion in the end. Third madam was third madam in the end. She quickly calmed down and continued to follow Han Yunshi forward. This time, Han Yunshi didn't directly open the drawer with the snake poison smell. Instead, she casually opened a few normal drawers without poison before finally opening the one with the snake poison smell. In the end, she still didn't find any snake poison, only medicinal ingredients. Third madam, the medicinal ingredients here aren't cheap. Han Yunshi joked with a smile. Esteemed Wang Fei must be joking. I don't have many medicinal ingredients here, nor do I care about them. The Han family's pharmacy has a lot, and the ones in the storehouse are rare. If esteemed Wang Fei is interested, we can accompany you to the pharmacy to take a look. Third madam smiled and didn't notice anything strange. The Han family's pharmacy did have a lot of medicinal ingredients, even more than the storehouse. However, they were all common medicinal ingredients, so Han Yunshi wasn't interested. Even if 7 of the 10 snake poisons were found in the pharmacy, that would be normal. After all, those snake poisons could be used in medicine. However, third madam's place wasn't simple. It was possible that third concubine's 3 types of snake venom were also used to concoct medicine. However, Han Yunqi was still unwilling to believe that things could be so coincidental that the 3 snake venoms were all gone and replaced by other medicinal materials. Looking at third concubine's smiling expression, Han Yunqi wondered if asking third concubine at this time would inadvertently alert the enemy. After a moment of careful consideration, she decided not to say anything. "I won't go over. I'm tired today. It's time to go back." As she spoke, she stretched lazily and walked out of the wooden house. Outside, Madame Shu, her son, and Han Ruoxue were all worried about the storeroom key. Seeing Han Yunqi's nonchalant attitude, they gnashed their teeth in anger, especially Han Yunqi. "Esteemed Wang Fei." He paused for a moment before continuing, "Are you really going to arrange for us to meet father? You're not lying, are you? What's wrong? Does eldest young master doubt this princess's words?" Han Yunqi coldly asked back. "I'm not doubting, I just don't know if I can believe you." Han Yunqi said a bunch of nonsense in a strange tone. Madame Shu also opened her mouth with a smile. "Esteemed Wang Fei, how about this? You set a time so that we can all prepare." "That's right. Set a time so that we can prepare." The impatient Han Ruoxue also quickly agreed. Of course they had to set a time. Otherwise, who knew when Han Yunqi would do it? In the end, they might just drag it out and leave it unsettled. Han Yunqi looked at everyone one by one and pretended to ponder, looking troubled. Seeing this, Han Yunqi sneered, "Esteemed Wang Fei, you can't be thinking of saying that you can't make an exception for the Supreme Court, right? This matter is really difficult to handle." Han Yunqi sighed. Seeing Han Yunqi in such a difficult situation, everyone was secretly delighted. They all thought that they had forced her into a corner and that she had nothing to say. But who knew that Han Yunqi would only sigh and say, 10 days. 10 days later, I'll arrange for all of you to see father. Actually, as long as she said the word, the Han family would immediately see Han Konggan. But this group of people was in such a hurry, so of course she had to make them wait like a year. They were waiting to see her make a fool of herself, waiting to see her trick exposed. And she was waiting to see their reactions after seeing Han Konggan. Presumably, Madame Shu and eldest young master's reactions would be the most spectacular. They didn't think that Han Yunqi would give a time so quickly. Madame Shu and Han Ruoxue were very surprised. Han Yunqi still didn't dare believe it and asked again, "Esteemed Wang Fei, are you sure? Don't go back on your word and play with us." This time, Han Yunqi was angry and coldly said, "What, does eldest young master want this Wang Fei to write a contract? Can the imperial family's people not keep their word?" The words imperial family's people reminded Han Yunqi to have a sense of propriety. If he didn't want his butt to be hit again, he'd better restrain himself. Angrily glancing at Han Yunqi unwillingly said, "I'll believe you this time." Seventh Madam was the most taciturn of them all. She looked at Han Yunqi with surprise and worry. She also didn't believe that her husband would entrust such a big matter to esteemed Wang Fei. She was really afraid that esteemed Wang Fei would cause trouble and harm her. Esteemed Wang Fei had saved the young general and the crown prince with great difficulty and had some status in the imperial family. What if something shameful happened? What would she do? Moreover, once esteemed Wang Fei lost her power and offended Madame Shu, her and little Ye's future days would be even more difficult. Seventh Madam could only hope to see her husband in 10 days so that he could make arrangements for them. After blocking Han Yunqi's mouth, Han Yunqi rubbed little Ye's head and said, "Ye, study your medical books well. Don't be like some ignorant and incompetent people who only know how to fight for power all day. We'll be doctors in the future. To be a doctor, you must first have moral character, then medical character. Do you understand?" This time, little Ye didn't look at his mother. Instead, he directly nodded and answered very seriously, "Understood." Han Yunqi was overjoyed and instructed Seventh Madam, don't keep anything to yourself. Feel free to talk to little Chen Xiong. Seeing her is like seeing me." These words were not so much for Seventh Madam to hear, but for Madame Shu to hear. She still wanted to keep little Chen Xiong in the Han family. After finishing her instructions, Han Yunqi was in a particularly good mood. She turned back to look at the small wooden house one more time before turning to leave. She thought that she had to get a batch of spring tea to test and think of a way to personally inspect Third Madam's courtyard. Who knows, she might make some other unexpected discoveries. Of course, the faster she did this, the better. Otherwise, Third Madam would be on guard and she wouldn't be able to find anything. In the dead of winter, spring tea was a rare thing. But no matter how rare it was, if Third Madam could get her hands on it, Han Yunshi would be able to as well. The first thing Han Yunshi did when she returned to the Duke of Qin's estate was to give Steward Xie a large sum of silver and tell him to get a large batch of spring tea and well-preserved summer tea as quickly as possible. In the past, she'd only used autumn tea for her experiments. She'd left out the spring and summer teas. Now that she'd been inspired by Third Madam, she looked forward to discovering something. After seeing Han Yunshi leave, Murong Wanru emerged from her hiding spot, calm and composed as she gave Steward Xie a cold look. Ever since Han Yunshi saved the Crown Prince and attended the Empress Dowager's banquet, Grand Concubine Yi had been restless. She hadn't bothered Han Yunshi in the past few days, but she'd warned Murong Wanru repeatedly to keep a close eye on Han Yunshi and report back as soon as there were any clues. Naturally, Murong Wanru kept a close eye on her. But to her surprise, Han Yunshi didn't have any connections with the palace at all. Instead, she'd stirred up quite a bit of trouble at the Han estate. According to reliable information from spies, Han Yunshi had grasped the storehouse key that symbolized the head of the Han family. Moreover, she'd hit the eldest young master. A married-off daughter was actually meddling in her maternal family's affairs and controlling the house key. If news of this got out, Han Yunshi would become the talk of the streets and alleys as everyone pointed fingers at her. Murong Wanru didn't report the news to Grand Concubine Yi immediately. She was waiting for the Han family to make a bigger fuss. From what she understood, Lady Shu of the Han family wasn't easy to provoke. Of course, if Lady Shu couldn't make a fuss, she didn't mind helping her on the sly. "Steward Xie, what did my sister-in-law tell you to do? It seems urgent." Murong Wanru asked with a smile. Esteemed Wang Fei told this one to buy some tea. Maybe the kitchens didn't send enough, Steward Xie said as he quickly took out the silver that Han Yunshi had given him. Hehe, she knows how to drink tea too? Murong Wanru laughed disdainfully. She caught sight of the wads of silver in Steward Xie's hands. The sight of it made her eyes turn red. She'd counted all the gold, silver, and ingots bestowed by the emperor last time. It was enough to feed Han Yunshi for the rest of her life. As for her, she relied on the money from the accounts to live each month. Although it wasn't a small amount, it wasn't enough for her to squander. Every month, she'd be hard-pressed for a few days. Comparing the two made her feel stifled. Thinking up to here, Murong Wanru didn't hesitate to take half of the silver from Steward Xie's hands. Without a word, she gave a cold snort and left. Of course, Steward Xie didn't dare to make a sound, but his heart was filled with resentment. In the past, Miss Murong had intercepted plenty of Grand Concubine Yi's rewards for her servants. Who in the estate didn't know that this foster daughter had admired the Duke of Qin for a long time? Compared to Grand Concubine Yi, this foster daughter probably hated esteemed Wang Fei even more. However, putting aside the generous rewards, many of the servants were still on the side of the Princess Consort after interacting with her for a period of time. Esteemed Wang Fei was a good-natured person who never made things difficult for the servants. Just this point alone was enough to throw Murong Wanru off. If it wasn't for the fact that Grand Concubine Yi doted on Murong Wanru, no one would be afraid of this foster daughter. Steward Xie had spoken up for esteemed Wang Fei just then. He only said he wanted to buy tea leaves, but didn't say how much less spring tea. Although he didn't know why esteemed Wang Fei wanted so much tea leaves, it was better if Miss Murong didn't know. Fortunately, esteemed Wang Fei had given him enough silver. Even if half of it was taken away, Steward Xie still had enough to use. Han Yunshi's mood recovered. She returned to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion and planned to do a thorough cleaning of the study. But as soon as she reached the courtyard gates, she saw a kind-looking old mama in her 40s. She was dressed simply, but her hands and feet were nimble as she carried out a large pile of trash. Han Yunshi gave a start. Who was this? This old servant, Zhao Mema, Pays respects to esteemed Wang Fei. This old servant was sent here by His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin said to have this old servant and Chen Xiong serve esteemed Wang Fei together. Zhao Mema quickly made a bow and introduced herself, not forgetting to sneak a peek at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi finally understood. She looked Zhao Mema over and unconsciously bit her lip. Oh, her O was drawn out very long. No matter how you listened to it, it sounded like there was a deeper meaning behind it. Zhao Mema grew uneasy as she looked at the trash in her hands and hastened to explain. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness told this servant to clean up all of this. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.